These real witch hunts that ended in pure evil will blow you away. These are real events involving real people who lived, suffered, and passed away, and in each case, the ending wasn't justice, it was just pure evil. The Salem witch trials. A scream pierced the cold February air of 1692. 9-year-old Betty Paris lay thrashing in her bed, her cousin Abigail Williams beside her, clawing at her own neck as if unseen hands were wrenching her. Outside their home in Salem Village, rumors had already begun to spread, whispers of the devil walking amongst them. Now, the Puritans who settled Massachusetts believed the world was a battlefield between God and Satan, and they lived in constant fear of damnation. Now, the smallest misfortunes, such as a ruined crop or a sick cow, could be explained away by witchcraft. But when Betty and Abigail's strange fits began, the village was ready to believe something far darker was at work. The local doctor declared there was no natural cause. That left only one explanation. The girls were victims of witches because, it couldn't possibly be anything else, Soon, under pressure, the girls accused 3 women, one being Tituba, the enslaved servant in the Paris household. Another was Sarah Good, a destitute beggar, and Sarah Osborne, a sickly woman who rarely attended church, which at the time was the biggest deal. Now, Tituba's confession shocked the community. She spoke of black dogs, red cats, and a tall man from Boston who promised her freedom if she served him. Whether coerced or fabricated, her words unleashed hysteria. Neighbors accused neighbors, old grudges resurfaced as proof of dark pacts. The trials that followed were a masterclass in paranoia. The court allowed spectral evidence, claims that an accused witch's spirit had appeared to torment someone, even if they were physically somewhere else. One by one, victims fell. Bridget Bishop, the first to be executed, was unalived in June. By September, 19 had been executed. One man named Giles Corey was pressed to his demise under heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea, and at least 5 others had passed away in the squalor of Salem's jails. When the madness finally subsided in 1693, the damage was irreversible. Families were shattered, reputations destroyed, and the courts themselves discredited. Years later, the colony would formally apologize and compensate the victims' descendants, but that could never undo the raw terror that consumed Salem during those fateful months. The Torsaker witch trials in 1675 in Sweden. Now, the snow-covered hills of Torsaker were silent on the morning of June 1st, 1675, except for the heavy boots of guards escorting 71 prisoners towards a frozen execution ground. They were mothers, all bound, all condemned to perish. Now, Sweden's witch panic, known as Det Stora Översandet, the Great Noise, had been raging for years. The Lutheran Church and the Crown were convinced the devil was recruiting women to his service, taking them to a mythical place called Blackula for satanic feasts and just other crazy stuff. Now, in Torsaker, the hysteria began when the local minister, Laurentus Christofori Herenus, claimed 2 children in the parish could identify witches by a secret mark only they could see. Week after week, villagers were called to stand, before the church. The children would walk past them, touching those they claimed were witches. That was all it took to seal a person's fate. Now, the interrogations were brutal. Suspects were threatened with eternal, damnation if they didn't confess. Many broke under the pressure, admitting to flying through the night, meeting the devil, and casting spells. The charges were absolutely absurd, but the confessions, whether forced or imagined, became undeniable proof. On execution day, the condemned were led to a hill outside the village. One by one, they were basically beheaded with an axe, and their bodies then, kind of burned on pyres to prevent their spirits from returning. In a single day, Torsaker lost more than 1/5 of its women. It remains the largest mass execution for witchcraft in Sweden's history. A moment when fear and religious, fervor basically turned neighbor against neighbor, and the truth just no longer mattered. The Wurzburg witch trials from 1625 to 1631 in Germany. Now, picture a city where every day could be your last. That was Wurzburg in Germany. During one one of Europe's worst witch hunts ever. Now, the early 17th century was a time of war, famine, and a lot of disease. In Würzburg, Prince Bishop Philip Adolf von Ehrenberg saw witches literally everywhere. It began with a few arrests, women accused of kind of just ruining crops or spreading plague even, but the trials spiraled quickly. Whole families were targeted, even noblemen and city officials were not spared. Children as young as 9 were accused of dancing with the devil and sent to burn. I mean, the methods of extraction were horrific until they confessed, and confessed they did, naming, others to end their suffering, which only, fed the endless chain of accusations. The numbers are staggering. In Würzburg alone, between 157 and 219 executions took place across the surrounding territories. The demise toll may have reached about 900. The frenzy was so all-consuming that it threatened to depopulate entire villages. The Pappenheimer witch trial in 1600 in Munich, Germany. Now, in the summer of 1600, a ragged family wandered the streets of Munich. Now, the Pappenheimers were beggars accused of petty theft and other stuff, but when a string of unsolved crimes terrified the city, officials decided they'd found their scapegoats. Under torment, the family was forced to confess not only to the crimes in question, but also to witchcraft, devil worship, and just a laundry list of impossible acts, poisoning, wells and unaliving children and desecrating the Eucharist. Now, the more they denied, the worse the torment became. Authorities staged the executions as public theater. The Pappenheimers were paraded through the streets, mutilated, and displayed before the crowds. Their supposed witches' tools were actually burned alongside them. This wasn't justice. It was a warning to the poor and the powerless that literally anyone could be next. The trial became infamous across Europe and just a symbol of, cruelty. Even in a time, when witch hunts were common, the sheer brutality shocked onlookers. But for the Pappenheimers, there was no outcry strong enough to save them. Their names became synonymous with evil, not because of what they did, but because of what was done to them. The Bonus witches in 1679 in Scotland. Now, in the coastal town of Bo'ness, Scotland, the winter of 1679 brought with it more than just cold winds from the Firth and Forth. It brought accusations of the devil walking amongst the townsfolk. Now, 5 women, Margaret Pringle, Bessie Vicker, Annapole Thompson, and 2 Margaret Hamiltons, were accused of witchcraft, along with 1 man, William Craw. Now, the charges were wild, honestly, holding drunken feasts with the devil in human and animal form, making pacts in exchange for protection, and transforming into animals to avoid capture. The most disturbing confessions came from Annapole Thompson, who claimed the devil visited her as a man in black and promised to ease her poverty if she served him. Margaret Hamilton, an elderly widow, said that she had served him for 3 decades, often in the form of a black dog. Now, whether these were delusions, coerced statements, or just outright fabrications, the court treated them as, proof. On December 23rd, 1679, the condemned were asphyxiated with iron collars, their bodies burned at the stake, and the execution was public, part punishment, part, spectacle, meant to remind the living there of the price of basically dancing with the devil. Now, today, the Bonus witches are remembered not as servants of darkness, but as victims of a darkness far more real, the cruelty of human fear. Now, across continents and centuries, these stories repeat. Fear turns to accusation, accusation to torment, torment to execution. Innocent lives ended not because of what they'd done, but because of what their communities were willing to believe.
Number 5, did rye bread cause the witch hunts? According to my research, this is apparently the most common bizarre myth in all of Salem. So ergot is a fungus blight that forms hallucinogenic, fun stuff in bread, causing its victims to appear bewitched when actually they're just higher than a kite. The victims of ergot might suffer paranoia and hallucinations, twitches and spasms, cardiovascular trouble, and stillborn stuff. This particular fungus thrives in a cold winter followed by a wet spring and seriously weakens the immune system. Human poisoning due to the consumption of rye bread made from ergot-infected grain was actually pretty common in Europe back in the Dark Ages. The first mention of a plague of gangrenous ergotism in Europe comes from Germany back in 857, and following this, France and Scandinavia experienced similar outbreaks. England is notably absent from the historical regions affected by ergotism since its main source of food was wheat, which is resistant to ergot fungi. Back in 944, a massive outbreak of ergotism caused 40,000 deaths in the regions of Aquitaine, Limousin, Périgord, and Angoumois in France. The theory of ergot poisoning is that it grew on the rye that the colonists of Salem used to make their bread. The ergot would have had that LSD-like effect that caused the inhabitants to see and hear things that weren't there, thus causing the bizarre hallucinations, which caused over 250 people to be accused of witchcraft. The origins of this legend started in 1976 when Linda R. Caporio wrote a paper entitled Ergotism, the Satan Loosed in Salem. It was publicly dismissed by Stephen Nissenbaum, a historian and co-author of Salem Possessed, and over the years dozens of experts have weighed in and found the basis for this theory lacking in anything resembling convincing. For starters, at the time the custom was for all bread to be served toasted, as Puritans generally believed that untoasted bread caused stomach problems, which would have helped to kill off any ergot that survived baking. Also, one of the most common side effects besides hallucinations was gangrene and necrotism of the extremities. If this was happening during a time when every single instance of perceived witchcraft was being documented, and dozens of people were so affected by this, ergot poisoning that they were having hallucinations, someone would have documented that, the other symptoms were happening as well. And to my knowledge, the other symptoms weren't as common. Number 4, the ghost of Sheriff George Corwin. So while I've done my best to try and leave the witches themselves off of today's list, since I did promise y'all legends that weren't the trials, you might have picked up by now that most of the legends revolve around the history of the trials in one way or another. There's no escaping it, so make sure you're still buckled up and enjoy. Sheriff Corwin was the most infamous and brutal when it came to interrogating and handling accused witches back in the day, earning himself a nickname for his heinous methods of torment. Oh, you want to know what the nickname was? Well, sadly, I'm not allowed to say it thanks to interweb rules, but it involved hands around necks and lack of air. A building called the Joshua Ward House now stands on top of the land where George lived and died, and many people say that they've seen him in the windows or even felt his hands pressing down around their necks when they're inside the space. In terms of lineage, he was the nephew of witchcraft trials judge and witch house owner Jonathan Corwin. He's most famously known for the case of Giles Corey, who endured peine forte et dure, or a pressing of stones upon his chest for 3 days, while Sheriff Corwin repeatedly asked him to enter an official plea before his God and country, which Corey had refused to do so in court. According to the legend, George was so sadistic and enjoyed tormenting folks so much that he had a secret dungeon below his home, where he could carry out his fiendish desires whenever he wished. Now that we have the legend part of this out of the way, time to consult the history books for the factual side of things. The actual cases of George tormenting the accused are documented, but are far fewer than have actually been attributed to him. In the case of Giles Corey, who had pleaded innocent but refused to use the official phrasing, likely to delay proceedings and cause trouble for the court and judges that he was furious with, his punishment was technically illegal by the original Massachusetts law. The Body of Liberties Act of 1641 forbade extreme harm, and while the Body of Liberties was officially replaced by the Provincial Charter in 1691, aka the year the witchcraft hysteria began, it was still very much upheld in spirit during this time, and George performing these acts was not seen as appropriate. It may have even led to Governor Phipps, paying more attention to the trials and to disband the court of Oyer and Terminer that he himself had set up. Also, if he had actually had his own personal dungeon for illegal bad things, there would have had to have been multiple cover-ups, and there isn't really proof of that during a time when everything was documented. At the end of the day, there isn't proof he did, or didn't, so let me know in the comments where you stand on this. Number 3, tunnels under the graveyard. Honest to goodness, the moment I heard about this as a possibility, my modern brain started to think about all the ways this could be convenient today. Also, being a Disney girl, my brain did jump to the utilidor system that runs under Disney World. Ooh, and the Toronto Path. Granted, I never really use it unless my dad's visiting and we're walking around downtown, or if I'm trying to get to Union Station after a convention downtown. Pardon me, I know, off topic. So this legend claims that underneath the old Bearing Point Cemetery is a series of tunnels that used to be connected to the Salem Harbor. Used for smuggling or simply unloading ships, these tunnels would flood with the high tide. When digging graves, workers would simply open up shafts to these tunnels, and as the priest would ask the mourners to look up to the heavens, they would unceremoniously dump the bodies down these shafts to be washed out to sea. It sounds a smidge morbid, and hard to believe, but that's the joy of legends. But here's the thing, it actually has the tiniest glimmer of truth, the tiniest, most minuscule flicker. Smaller than Tinkerbell. Originally, the Salem Harbor did come close to what is currently the cemetery, until sections of the city were filled in, and there are some tunnels underneath Salem. However, the rest is such complete and utter ridiculousness that historians are adamant it isn't true. But there's only one way to find out. Who wants to go on a road trip to Salem with me to go tunnel hunting? My car has room for plenty of people, trust me. Number 2, the bodies under the witch house. So remember when I mentioned Jonathan Corwin just a few moments ago? Yeah, that's about to come into play again. So when the Corwin house, aka Jonathan's house, was moved back in the 1940s to accommodate the widening of the street, underneath the original hearth were several bones. These were thought to be hidden bodies, and the town was in an uproar over the hidden corpses in the basement of the witch house. And if we're going off of information based on the legend, it would make sense with the whole secret dungeon of George's. This legend actually has the most historical fact behind it, as there was indeed a newspaper article about bones found under the witch house, along with a shocking headline and gruesome photo to accompany it. Sadly, or well, I guess not sadly for humans, just sadly for the purpose of sensationalism, the reality behind that headline is a little more mundane. It was common at the time of building said house, around the 1640s, to bury meat or bones underneath the cooking hearth in order to promote plentiful food for its inhabitants. Even if this wasn't the case, since I know we all like to poke holes into thin theories, the odds of charred bones from various meals over the past 300 years finding their way into the ashes and under added bricks isn't really unlikely. And regardless of their origin, the bones discovered were decidedly not human. Apparently a whole boatload of tests were done. So sadly, unlike the Disney urban legend where we found out that there really are human boats on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, this one might be bunk. As a side note to this entry, there are no official cases of witchcraft trial victims being brought to the Corwin house for examination. While Corwin may have heard original accusations in his parlor, the odds of him being willing to bring an accused witch into his home, with his family and descendants, are astronomically against it. Dang it all though, I like when my theories are right. Number 1, the Seven Gables Secret Stairs. The House of the Seven Gables, which is also known as the Turner House or Turner Ingersoll Mansion, is a 1668 colonial mansion in Salem, Massachusetts, named for its gables. It was made famous by Nathaniel Hawthorne's 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables, and is now a non-profit museum. The earliest section of the House of the Seven Gables was built in 1668 for Captain John Turner and remained in his family for 3 generations, descending from John Turner II to John Turner III. You get the idea. Facing south towards Salem Harbor, it was originally a 2-room, 2.5-story house with a projecting front porch and a massive central chimney, but nowadays that portion forms the middle of the house. 4 windows of the original ground room floor, which became a dining room, remain in the house's side wall, and a few years after the original build, a kitchen lean-to and a new north kitchen L to the rear of the house were added. By 1676, Captain Turner had added a spacious front extension with its own chimney, containing a parlor on the ground floor with a large bedchamber above it. Ceilings in this new wing are higher than the very low ceilings in older parts of the house, and it featured double basement windows and an overhang with carved pendants. It was all capped with a 3-gabled garret. In the first half of the 18th century, John Turner II remodeled the house in the New Georgian style, adding wood paneling and sash windows. These alterations are preserved as very early examples of Georgian decor. The House of the Seven Gables is one of the oldest surviving timber-framed mansion houses in continental North America, with 17 rooms and over 8,000 square feet, including its large cellars. So for as long as people have been giving and taking tours of the House of the Seven Gables, the story has gone that the secret staircase of the house was used for just about everything, from smuggling freed slaves through the Underground Railroad to hiding secret lovers for midnight trysts. Sadly, it's just a set of servant stairs. So back when servants were in common usage, these stairs and passages were just as common, since it was considered unseemly for the servants to be in public view. They were meant to be invisible, spiriting into rooms to make them tidy without anybody noticing them. Ergo, hidden stairs and passageways were built to make it easy for them to access areas without meeting the gentry in the main halls and stairs. They're pretty common in older grand places. Locations like Casa Loma jump to mind for me, since they have one behind like a fireplace or something, if my memory's correct. Apparently in recent years there has been some debate over whether the staircase would have been part of the original or later period structure, as it was part of a rebuild by a famous colonial revivalist architect by the name of Joseph Chandler at the direction of Caroline Emerton in 1909. It absolutely fits with the design of servant stairs though that are seen in many similar structures.
Number 5. North Brother Island, New York. The North Brother Island is one of 2 small islands located in the East River of New York City. The island remained uninhabited until 1885, with the only trace of humanity being a small lighthouse that was erected in 1869. The island began seeing more use in 1885 when the Riverside Smallpox Hospital moved from Roosevelt Island to North Brother when their mission expanded to treating and isolating victims of other quarantinable diseases such as typhoid, tuberculosis, and especially polio. In 1904, a steamship called the General Slocum was set ablaze, and over 1,000 people perished, either from the fire or from drowning while trying to escape, and ended up washing ashore on the island. Of course, many people have reported seeing a ghostly steamship in the years since, and sightings of the spectral victims of the fire are reported from afar, with them wandering the beach of the island, seemingly lost and in pain. One of the most famous residents at the hospital was Mary Mallon, otherwise known as Typhoid Mary, who was confined on the island for 20 years until her death in 1938, after being declared a public health menace for infecting between 51 and 122 people while working as a cook. As public health measures like vaccines began to be adopted in the 30s and 40s, the need for a quarantine hospital lessened to the point where the hospital was closed. It was converted into housing for war veterans who were going to school in the city following World War II, before being converted into a rehabilitation facility for young people suffering from substance abuse issues. But it was closed in 1963 due to the cost of upkeep and the widespread corruption of the staff. In the years since, it was considered for a variety of purposes, including housing for the homeless and an extension of the jail at Rikers Island, but the danger of the unmarked manholes and the advanced dilapidation of the buildings, which are mostly collapsed and overrun by poison ivy, resulted in such ideas being abandoned. It was eventually decided that the site would serve as a bird sanctuary for herons and other wading shorebirds. Although many of the original 25 buildings are still standing in some shape or form, it has been made off limits to the public and is only available for supervised visits for those intending to go ashore for, quote, compelling academic and scientific purposes. With its history of confinement and death, perhaps it is for the best that this site has been deemed unfit for public visitation, although the history of the island is indeed compelling. Number 4. Boblo Island Amusement Park, Ontario. North America has no shortage of amusement parks for families and thrill seekers alike to visit. The Canadian province of Ontario has several to choose from, including Canada's Wonderland, Great Wolf Lodge, and Splashdown Niagara. One theme park that you won't be able to buy a ticket for, however, is the Boblo Island Amusement Park, located on the island of Bois Blanc, just above the mouth of the Detroit River. The park was opened in 1898 and used a ferry system to service guests from Ontario and Detroit and bring them to the island, where they had a variety of attractions to keep them occupied and having fun. Some of these included the Falling Star, a log flume, a theater, a sky tower, Ferris wheel, a zoo, a carousel, and a dance hall, financed by Henry Ford. It also had 3 roller coasters, the Screamer, the Nightmare, and the Sky Streak. It also had Boblo's Scootaboats, which were essentially aquatic bumper cars. The park operated for many years before eventually closing down for financial reasons in late 1993. There are still ferries that operate in order to get island residents on and off the island, but the now abandoned amusement park has been declared off limits by the property owners. Of course, the dilapidated carousel building, dance pavilion, and sky tower have since proven to be too appealing for urban explorers to keep away from, and the eerie, overgrown site still sees a variety of visitors. Like any good amusement park, it of course has a reputation for being haunted by a variety of ghosts. My personal favorite of the ghost stories is the story of Smiley the Magician. Back when the theater still operated and showed a variety of different performers, one of the most consistently booked performers of the 30s and 40s was a magician named Smiley Smilovich. Smiley was an old-school magician who had trained with Houdini in the late 20s and was known for his seemingly death-defying tricks. One of his most famous tricks was a metamorphosis trick, where he would put a trunk on stage, climb into it, lock it, and then have the trunk set on fire. He would escape through a trap door, the trunk would burn away, revealing that he had escaped, and the crowd would go wild. One day he was doing this trick as usual, but when he locked himself in the trunk, he had a heart attack and died. The trunk was then set on fire, and the audience was left in terror as Smiley's body burned in front of them. Ever since then, Smiley's ghost would apparently haunt the theater, being sighted watching shows that were performed there, showing a special interest in magic shows. In the years since the park's closure, the occasional rumor of the magician being spotted has come up from the various urban explorers checking out the overgrown buildings. Would you ever be brave enough to explore Boblo Island Amusement Park? And if you did, would you be on the lookout for spectral magicians? Number 3. Bangar Fort, India. This 17th century fortress has a reputation for being the most haunted place in India, with people refusing to build homes near the fort for fear of falling under its curse. Despite this reputation, there is some debate as to why it is haunted, with two very different stories being told. In the first story, a king named Madho Singh wanted to build the fort but needed the permission of an ascetic monk who lived on the nearby land. The monk granted him permission to build the fort, but warned him that the fort's shadow must never fall upon the monk's home. Madho agreed to these terms and built the fort to the specifications. However, one of his successors added to the fortifications vertically, causing the fort's shadow to engulf the forbidden home, causing the fort to fall to ruin and become haunted. Another version of the tale is that an evil sorcerer fell in love with a beautiful princess named Ratnavati. She rebuffed his advances, so he bewitched a cosmetic that she was going to use that would force her to fall in love with him. She found out about this scheme and poured the cosmetic onto a large boulder, which then crushed the sorcerer. With his dying breath, the sorcerer cursed the fort so that no one would ever be able to live there in peace. The fort is open to the public during the day, but it is forbidden to set foot on the property at night, as that is when the hauntings occur, with several people who have tried to disprove the ghost by staying overnight, going missing, or coming out catatonic. Number 2. The Paris Catacombs. When you consider how many locations like old houses or abandoned mental institutions have a reputation for being haunted due to the discovery of just a few bodies, it comes as no surprise that many of the world's catacombs have apparently been discovered to be haunted by specters of the past. Take for example the Paris Catacombs. Built as a mass grave in the 18th century in order to deal with the overflowing of local cemeteries, the Paris Catacombs hold the remains of millions of Parisians. A few years after being established, Louis-Étienne Héricard decided to make the catacombs a work of art by arranging the bones into elaborate displays. An inscription in the catacombs even reads, "Arrête, c'est ici l'Empire de la Mort," which translates to "Stop, this is the Empire of the Dead." Although a small section of the catacombs are available for visitors to peruse, the vast majority of the seemingly endless tunnels are banned for tourists to visit. In the years since they were constructed, there have been several reports of ghosts wandering the halls of the labyrinth-like grave, searching for a way out. As if that weren't bad enough, rumor has it that if you come into the catacombs at night, you will hear the whispers of all the spirits of the catacombs, trying to convince you to venture deeper and deeper into the catacombs until you become lost and unable to find your way out. Another often reported ghost is that of Philibert Asper, who was a doorman at the Val-de-Grâce hospital, who made his way into the catacombs in late 1793 when he was sent to fetch liquor from a cellar. With only the light of a candle to find his way out, he soon became lost and confused. It is also theorized that he was quite drunk at the time. His candle eventually went out and it became pitch black. He was missing for 11 years before his remains were found and identified due to the hospital keys and the bottle of liquor in his hand. He was interred in the catacombs at the exact location where he was found. In the years since, urban explorers calling themselves cataphiles have reported seeing the spirit of Asper wandering the halls of the catacombs with his candle on the anniversary of him going missing. The cataphiles are known for paying their respects at his grave, and they have named his spirit the protector of the cataphiles. Number 1. Poveglia Island, Italy. In the lagoon between Venice and Lido, you will find the small island known as Poveglia. It was first inhabited in the year 421, when mainlanders relocated to the island to escape barbarian invaders. Due to its small size, the island was easily defensible, and frankly, not worth the trouble for invaders to bother attacking. The small community stayed on the island for centuries, enjoying their independence from taxes and laws of the mainland, but their population eventually dwindled, leaving the island uninhabited. This changed in the year 1348, when the bubonic plague was ravaging Venice and the surrounding towns. Poveglia became a quarantine island, with symptomatic Italians being banished there to die. The center of the island had a giant pyre, where tens of thousands of plague victims' bodies were burnt to prevent the spread of the disease. When the plague returned in the year 1630, the island became a quarantine colony, once again, with even more bodies being burnt in the town square. Naturally, the location developed a reputation for being haunted by the tens of thousands of displaced and abandoned plague victims, but the island's creepy history was far from over. Aside from a brief period where Napoleon used the island to store gunpowder, relying on the ghost stories of the place to keep unwanted visitors away, the island remained largely uninhabited until an insane asylum was built on the island in the late 1800s. It was a brutal hospital that was poorly constructed and used more to exile the patients from society than to help rehabilitate them. One of the doctors working there in the 30s conducted strange and cruel experiments on the patients for years, before going mad himself and flinging himself from the bell tower. Though this bell tower was removed years ago, people still claim to hear the sound of the bells emanating from the island. The hospital became an old folks home briefly, but that closed in 1975, leaving the island completely abandoned. A construction crew tried to restore the hospital, but suddenly stopped, refusing to return to the island due to how intensely haunted the island has become. The government has banned anyone from visiting the island, but its reputation has made it an infamous and terrifying location.
Starting off at number 5, burning at the stake. By far the most well-known punishment for those tried as witches, burning at the stake was a cruel and unusual form of execution used commonly back during the many witch trials of the 17th century. These executions were not only physically agonizing, but also symbolized the depths of human fear and prejudice. One such example of this terrible practice was the Wurzburg witch trials of the 17th century, known as one of the largest witch trials in history. Accused witches faced a horrifying fate at the stake. The authorities believed that fire possessed the purifying power to cleanse the accused of their alleged connections to the devil. In reality, it was a grotesque display of violence. Victims were often tied to wooden stakes in a public square, surrounded by jeering crowds. They were subjected to unimaginable pain as the flames slowly consumed them. The agony of being burnt alive was drawn out, excruciating, and inhumane. What made the burning of witches particularly cruel was the complete absence of credible evidence. The trials were fueled by paranoia, superstition, and hysteria. Accusations were often based on flimsy hearsay, personal grudges, or even just random suspicions. The accused had little chance to defend themselves, and confessions were often extracted through rigorous mental and physical torment. These false confessions only added to the tragedy, as innocent people were forced to implicate themselves and others in a desperate attempt to end their suffering. Furthermore, the persecution of witches during the Wurzburg witch trials, like many other witch hunts, was often intertwined with gender bias. Women, especially those who didn't conform to societal norms, were disproportionately targeted. Accusations of witchcraft could be used to control and punish women who challenged the status quo or were perceived as a threat to male authority. The cruelty of burning witches at the stake was not limited to the physical torment. It was a gruesome spectacle intended to terrify the populace into submission. Public executions were meant to send a message that dissent would not be tolerated and that conformity to prevailing religious and social norms was imperative. The psychological impact on society was profound, as fear and mistrust tore communities apart. The Wurzburg witch trials, like many others, were eventually recognized as a dark chapter in history. They serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria, religious fanaticism, and the absence of due process. Today, we look back on these events with horror and regret, vowing never to repeat the cruelty of burning alleged witches at the stake. It is a somber lesson that underscores the importance of justice, reason, and compassion in our pursuit of a more enlightened society. Next up at number 4, witch cakes. Witch cakes are a bizarre and unsettling aspect of the witch trials that swept through colonial America during the 17th century, as exemplified in the infamous case of Tituba. These cakes, concocted from peculiar ingredients, were believed to possess the power to reveal the presence of witches. While they may seem like a bizarre footnote in history, witch cakes serve as a chilling reminder of the hysteria and irrationality that fueled the witch trials. In the case of Tituba, a slave woman living in Salem, Massachusetts, witch cakes played a central role in her ordeal. Tituba was accused of practicing witchcraft, and her accuser sought a means to expose her supposed demonic affiliations. They decided to bake a witch cake, a crude mixture of rye meal and the urine of the afflicted girls who claimed to be victims of witchcraft. Ew. The logic behind these cakes was deeply flawed and rooted in superstition. It was believed that by feeding the cake to a dog, the dog would act as a conduit, causing the witch to experience pain and reveal their true nature. This bizarre form of witch detection demonstrates the length of which fear and paranoia can drive people to concoct irrational and cruel methods of persecution. Tituba was subjected to this ordeal, and when the dog exhibited unusual behavior, because it was eating urine, it was seen as evidence of her guilt. This marked the beginning of her traumatic dramatic journey through the Salem witch trials, which ultimately led to her confession under duress. The use of witch cakes underscores the hysteria and desperation that characterized the witch trials. Accusers and authorities were willing to resort to absurd and unscientific methods to justify their persecution of those they believed to be witches. These methods were not only illogical, but also cruel, as they subjected the accused to public humiliation, physical examinations, and often torment. Number 3. Dunking. Dunking was a cruel and unusual punishment employed during the witch trials that swept through Europe and its colonies in the 16th and 17th centuries, including Northamptonshire, England. This brutal practice, also known as ducking or swimming, was intended to determine an individual's guilt or innocence of witchcraft, but it often resulted in severe physical and psychological suffering. In Northamptonshire and other regions, dunking involved binding the accused witch, often a woman, and lowering her into a body of water, typically a river or pond. The rationale behind this test was rooted in superstition and flawed logic. It was believed that because witches had renounced their baptism, the pure element of water would reject them, causing them to float. If the accused floated, they were seen as guilty of witchcraft. If they sank, they were deemed innocent, but often drowned in the process. Being forcibly dunked into cold water while bound was a terrifying and painful experience. The accused would struggle for air and face the risk of drowning, all while the onlookers watched in morbid anticipation. Dunking was an arbitrary and irrational method of determining guilt. The outcome depended on various factors, such as the accused body's composition and the skill of the dunking implementers. Innocent people could easily be declared guilty, leading to wrongful executions. Despite its cruelty and lack of reliability, dunking persisted in witch trials because it was consistent with the prevailing belief in the supernatural and the desire for swift justice. It was only with the eventual decline of witch hunts and the advent of more rational legal systems that such inhumane practices were abandoned. At number 2, prayer tests. Prayer tests stand as the greatest example of the unjust nature of the witch trials and the persecution of innocent individuals, making it a cruel punishment for anyone put on trial. They were a controversial and often absurd method used during the witch trials to supposedly rule out witches. These tests were grounded in superstition and religious fervor rather than sound evidence. Two notable cases, those of Jane Wenham and George Burroughs, shed light on the use and cruel consequences of such prayer tests during witch trials. Jane Wenham's case is one of the last witch trials in England, occurring in 1712. She was accused of witchcraft in Hertfordshire, and her trial attracted considerable attention due to the changing climate of skepticism regarding witch trials. One of the methods employed to test her guilt or innocence was the prayer test. In Wenham's trial, the prayer test involved having the accused recite the Lord's Prayer without error, usually out of the Bible or other holy texts. It was believed that a witch would be unable to utter the prayer correctly due to their alleged unholy nature. However, this test was deeply flawed and arbitrary, as it ignored the fact that many accused witches were uneducated and might struggle with reading the Lord's Prayer, especially in the intense and stressful environment of a trial. She also underwent dunking in order to test her witchy nature. Fortunately, Jane Wenham was found not guilty, thanks to the rising skepticism surrounding witchcraft. Even when accused of flying, the judge would retort, "Is flying a crime?" Which it isn't. Her case is often cited as a turning point in England's witch trials, as it exposed the irrationality and injustice of such proceedings. But in the case of George Burroughs in 1692, he wasn't so lucky. George Burroughs was one of the individuals accused and executed during the Salem witch trials in colonial Massachusetts. His case highlights how the prayer test was used in the American context. In Burroughs' trial, the authorities used the Lord's Prayer as a test of his innocence. They believed that if he couldn't recite it correctly, he must be a witch. Burroughs, to the astonishment of many, recited the prayer flawlessly, challenging the validity of the test. However, the court, fueled by hysteria and prejudice, dismissed this as a trick of the devil. So much for testing him, right? George Burroughs was ultimately convicted and hanged, illustrating how even when an accused individual passed the prayer test, it did not guarantee their acquittal or protection from the witch hunt's irrationality. So yeah, if you were wanted dead back then, you would be made dead. And at number 1, crushing. In the annals of history, the Salem witch trials of 1692 stand as a stark testament to humanity's capacity for cruelty, particularly in the realm of legal punishment. Amid the hysteria that gripped colonial Massachusetts, a plethora of cruel and unusual methods were employed to elicit confessions from the accused witches. Among these harrowing practices, the use of pressing or crushing remains one of the most chilling. The process of pressing was as brutal as it was inhumane. The accused individual would be stripped of of all dignity and laid down in a dark, dank cell. Heavy stones or wooden boards, laden with an unimaginable weight, would then be stacked upon their chest. The agony that followed was beyond words. As the relentless pressure bore down, every grasp for breath became a desperate struggle. The rationale behind this method was chillingly simplistic. Those who confessed to their alleged dealings with the devil could halt the pressing, while those who resisted would face an excruciating demise. The authorities, consumed by fear and paranoia, believed that witches, having supposedly consorted with Satan, possessed a supernatural resilience that rendered them impervious to such torment. The cruelty of pressing was evident not only in its physical brutality, but also in its stark absence of due process. Accused witches had no chance to defend themselves, no legal representation, and no recourse to justice. Their fates rested in the hands of accusers and a court swayed by mass hysteria and irrational beliefs. Perhaps the most infamous case of pressing during the Salem witch trials was that of Giles Corey. A resilient and principled man, Corey refused to enter a plea, knowing that doing so would lead to the forfeiture of his property. His stoic resistance, in the face of a slow and agonizing death, made him a symbol of defiance against the unjust trials.
In the 1950s, Indiana local Jim Jones founded a church that he claimed promoted socialism and equality, with religious elements of Christianity. Initially, he wasn't much more than a charismatic hustler who faked faith healings by having audience plants pull chicken livers out of congregants' mouths, but as the years progressed, he demanded more and more of his followers. In the early 1970s, he moved his group to California and set them up in a commune-like settlement in Redwood Valley. After he established several locations throughout the state, including its main headquarters in San Francisco, the temple forged ties with many left-wing political figures and claimed to have like 2,000 members. Granted, it might have been more like 3 to 5. Jones eventually came to believe that nuclear war was imminent and moved his followers again to the South American country of Guyana, because he thought this would be outside the potential danger zone. So the group lived there for several years as the People's Temple Agricultural Project. But after former members started speaking out against the church, San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan decided to travel there to investigate claims of harm. During his visit, a number of temple members were like, "Hey, can we leave with you?" And they accompanied him to the local airstrip at Port Kituma. There they were intercepted by self-styled temple security guards who opened fire on the group, killing the congressman, 3 journalists, and one of the defectors, as well as injuring 9 others, including Ryan's aide, Jackie Spire. The video we have for you today is a couple of seconds of the incident that were captured on video by NBC cameraman Bob Brown, one of the journalists who sadly passed away in the attack. And this was right before the event we all know. That evening in Jonestown, Jones ordered his congregation to drink a concoction of poison-laced, grape-flavored Flavorate. Yeah, this is where we all got the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid, but it wasn't Kool-Aid. All in all, 918 people died, including 4 folks that died at the temple headquarters that night in the capital of Georgetown. Oh, and side note, surviving temple members of the mass death in the US announced their fears of being targeted by a hit squad composed of survivors, because, yeah, they were terrified. Similarly, in 1979, the Associated Press reported a U.S. congressional aides claim that there were 120 white, brainwashed professional killers out from Jonestown awaiting the trigger words to pick up their hit. Temple insider Michael Prokes, who had been ordered to deliver a suitcase which contained temple funds, which were supposed to be transferred to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, took his own life in March of 1979. 4 months after the incident. In the days leading up to his death, Michael sent notes to several people, together with a 30-page statement he had written about the temple. He had arranged for a press conference in a Modesto, California hotel room, during which he read a statement to the 8 reporters who attended, before excusing himself, entering a restroom, and sadly taking his life. A Canadian nature lover's attempt to capture wildlife on camera kind of backfired in a terrifying way after she accidentally documented what appeared to be nude witches eating a carcass at night, right by her house. She said, "I don't know what the heck was up with that." This was Cornea Stanhope. She told the news outlet because she was like, "What's going on?" She's like, "It really freaked us out. It's not something you see every day." Yeah, no kidding. Now, the Powell River local had reportedly been riding one of her horses one day when she came across a dead deer in her garden. And while most folks might have been like, "Okay, gross, let's just get rid of it," the woman and her father decided to set up a camera to see if the carcass would attract any critters at night. Because, why not? So she got there the next day, and Bob said, "Hey, there's nude people on the camera." And she's like, "Okay, you're kidding, right?" She called a bowl. And then he was like, nope, here's the photos. So these bone-chilling photos taken just after sunset showed two disheveled-looking women with long black hair that obscured their faces squatting over this dead deer and appearing to dine on its remains. The wicked hungry pair are completely in the nude, except for what looks like loincloths over their nether regions in the found footage horror film-esque moment. Now the woman said it looks like they have wigs on because one woman might have blonde hair underneath, but you can't really tell from the photos. And you can see like there was the hoof that was brought right up to her mouth. Our poor witness said she wasn't sure if these so-called witches of Beastwick were kissing it, smelling it, or eating it, but was nonetheless sickened by the ritual, given the amount of bacteria that was possibly on the decaying carcass. Also, she was especially creeped out because the impromptu cuddling session occurred only 2 minutes away from her house. And she was concerned about these women messing with her horses at night, because apparently the horses get really spooked and really unnerved around that specific area. So at first, our witness thought like she was imagining things. Maybe it's something nothing. Social media seemed pretty convinced that the Canadian had witnessed witches, a local cult, or some other malevolent entity performing a demonic ritual. Somebody was like, this is actually terrifying. Somebody else was like, that's an S-walker. They look human, so you come up to them, and once you do, you're gone. Another person was like, that's basically a walking demon from hell. If you hear screaming, stay inside, get a weapon, leave it alone. And a lot of folks were like, this is a demonic cult, which means stay away, folks. American professional boxer Ryan Garcia alleged once upon a time that Bohemian Grove, a place rumored to exist in the north of San Francisco, is very much real and is an elite club where he once witnessed some really heinous stuff. He claimed this while he was live on the app formerly known as Twitter with Andrew Tate on March 5 of 2024. Now, in the wake of his allegations, there was a video that went viral online that showed a satanic ritual. So this video was allegedly originally leaked in the year 2000 by prominent conspiracy theorist and radio show host Alex Jones, who allegedly infiltrated the Bohemian Grove around the same time after being denied entry multiple times. While the visual is a little hazy, audio is not the best, some kind of ritual was ongoing. There was fireworks, there was cloaked priests, and well, we've got all those speculations of alleged satanic ceremonies, and that's giving cult vibes. Additionally, Alex Jones's interview on the Joe Rogan Experience has also gone viral, where he claimed that when he trespassed on the Grove a couple decades back, he saw effigies being burnt in front of a large owl shrine, which only further fuels the alleged satanic cult ritual speculation. Well, the Bohemian Club website obviously denies the claims of secret and illegal affairs going on in the area, or technically even its existence. In a 2011 article, the Washington Post revealed that the members of the Manhattan Project met there regularly in the 1940s. That's enough proof for me. A mysterious snippet of footage showing people wearing black robes making an alleged human sacrifice in front of a statue at the European Organization for Nuclear Research campus was posted on YouTube back in 2016 to much debate. While some folks were quick to say, hey, it's fake, this was staged, it has been confirmed that the video was captured at the campus. It is believed that these cloaked figures are researchers performing a satanic sacrifice, just for reasons. And by the way, this area is a highly protected, restricted area with a lot of security gates and security cameras. And another mysterious piece of information is that the man who was filming the incident, even though he was freaking out because he was seeing all this weird stuff, his reflection shows that he's wearing a cloak similar to everybody else. So maybe he was a new initiate who got cold feet? And finally for today, back in 2021, Australia's ABC network was playing a routine news telecast when the anchor was taken by surprise as an unexpected satanic clip played during a switch of visuals. The anchor, Yvonne Young, was presenting a story about Queensland's proposal to make killing of police horses or dogs a criminal offense. Rightfully so. But her narration was visually cut by a frame of 3 officers walking down and then pans back at her. You know, typical stuff. However, a couple of seconds later, her narration once again gets interrupted by a change of visuals, but this time the network played a satanic ritual on screen during the live telecast. In those couple of seconds, a man can be seen standing in a black robe. Another person is seen standing beside the robe-clad person, and then there's somebody else sitting next to a keyboard. Oh, and by the way, there's also an upside-down cross in one corner of the room. The whole clip of the satanic ritual played for only a couple of seconds, but was caught by another media house. The man in the black robe can also be heard saying, "Hail Satan," So the producers realized the mistake, immediately cut the feed, brought the anchor back on screen, and she stayed silent for a couple of seconds and then quickly segued into another story. So a lot of folks believe that these people from the visual were members of the Noosa Temple of Satan that were protesting against Queensland's education department regarding religious instruction classes in schools. Meanwhile, the temple themselves retweeted the clip with the caption, "Satan works in mysterious ways." Yeah, I'm good.
Number 5 on this list is Sugiura. Sugiura is a Japanese fortune-telling ritual that's goal is to tell the user their future. To do this, you're gonna need to summon what many people believe is an undead spirit or a demon, and whenever you do that, there are always some risks involved. You're gonna need a few things to perform this ritual. A comb, something to cover your face with, not just a mask but your entire face has to be covered, and to be at a crossroads that won't be busy. Head to the crossroads with your comb and your face covering. You'll want to get there around 11:50 at night. When the clock hits midnight, take your comb and stroke the teeth of it so that it makes some noise. Then say the following words: Sugiura, Sugiura, grant me a true response. Now wait, it may take a little while, so you have to be patient. If nobody approaches the crossroads or someone you know approaches the crossroads, then sadly the ritual did not work and you can go home. If a stranger approaches though, then it did work, and you have just summoned an undead spirit. Once you see them in the distance, immediately throw your face covering on. When you feel their presence beside you, kindly ask them to tell you your fortune. They should do so and you will receive an insight into what is to come. The thing about fortunes though is that a lot of times you're not going to like what you hear. We always have these lofty expectations that assume life will always be better than it is right now. Well, what if you knew for certain that it's actually going to be worse and there isn't anything that you can do about it? That's one of the reasons why you shouldn't do this ritual, because knowing what comes can take the meaning out of life. This is also a demonic ritual where you're summoning an undead spirit. It doesn't always go the way that you want it to, and on occasion people have reported that the spirit that they summoned wasn't the one that they expected. Similar to how demons can hijack Ouija board experiences, they could do the exact same thing here. Number 4 on this list is the concentration ritual. This is a pretty strange one where you'll actually learn how you're going to die. If you want to do this, then you won't be able to do it by yourself. You're going to need another person to help you. Close your eyes and clear your mind. Have your friends stand behind you and lightly pound your back as they begin the concentration chant. Now for this video, I'm not going to go through the entire chant because it's actually really long, but to sum it up, there are 5 verses that act as a way of hypnotizing you and sending your spirit away from your body. When it finishes, your friend from behind you will give you a light push that should make you stumble and fall forward. As you're regaining your balance, open your eyes and you should see a color. The color that you see determines how you're gonna die. For instance, red means that somebody's gonna stab you. White means that you will die of old age and you'll go to heaven, whereas black means that you'll die of old age and go to hell. The thing about this game is that you'll never know when this is going to happen to you. So you may learn that you're going to die from being stabbed, but never know when or by who. So for the rest of your life, you will be living in constant paranoia of somebody stabbing you. I think when it comes to death, ignorance truly is bliss, and learning about how you can die can only ever make your life worse right now. Number 3 on this list is the elevator game. The elevator game is a demonic ritual of sorts that is supposed to grant you the ability to enter another world. This other world is considered by most to be a demon realm. The game itself started in Korea, but has slowly gained more intrigue across the world from people looking to potentially enter hell. To do this, you'll need an elevator in a building that's at least 10 stories tall. The building that you're in should ideally be as empty as possible. Get in your elevator and then proceed to these following floors in order. First, you go to the 4th floor, then you descend to the 2nd floor. Then up to the 6th, and then back down to the 2nd, and then go all the way up to the 10th floor, and then finally back down to the 5th. Now at the 5th floor is when things get interesting. People have done this and have reported having an encounter with a woman. This woman looks normal on the outside, but I promise you that she isn't to be trusted. She will enter the elevator from the 5th floor and do anything she can to gain your attention. This could come in the form of flattery, or she may even antagonize you, but whatever you do, do not pay her any mind at all. There doesn't seem to be a conclusive answer to what happens if you speak to her. However, death or an eternal haunting, these are very much on the table. Once she enters and you don't speak to her, press the first floor. If you descend to the first floor, get out of the elevator and don't look back. You weren't accepted into the other world. If the elevator starts to go up when you press the first floor though, then congratulations. You just made it into the demon realm. The elevator will rise to floor 10, and when the doors open, you will find yourself staring out at a very different version of the 10th floor. From my understanding, it looks very similar to the other side in the popular sci-fi television show Stranger Things. The lights will be out, darkness will flood the space. Apparently some people have reported seeing a red cross if you look out the windows. If you want to get back, then just repeat the steps that you did to get there and you should make it back home. Now this could all just be an elaborate prank to get people to hop in an elevator and waste their entire day by going up and down floors. Because if somebody hops in the elevator, then you have to stop and do it all over again. However, in 2013, a Canadian student died in an elevator, and when people watched back the footage, she was acting very strangely in the elevator prior to dying, almost as if she was being possessed. None of these rituals are an exact science, and any time you attempt to go to another world, expect there to be some potential consequences. Number 2 on this list is the Three Kings. The Three Kings is a ritual that should transport one person to an unknown dimension where they make a clarity on their past or future. Now for this ritual, you're gonna need a lot of things to make it work. A room without any outside light at all, a candle, a bucket of water, 2 sizable mirrors, an alarm clock, 3 chairs, a cell phone, and a friend that you trust. Yeah, I know, it's a lot of stuff. At around 11 at night, start setting up your ritual. Set up the chair in the middle of your room facing north and put the other 2 chairs next to it facing the same way. Take your mirrors and put them sitting in the chairs facing outwards. Have the bucket of water close by your chair. Now once all of this is done, it's time for you to go to sleep. Sleep until 3:30 a.m. in the morning. You must wake up precisely at that time and then head over to that room. Close the door and sit in the middle chair with your candle now lit. You should have your friend waiting outside of the door of the room that you're in. Now if all of this has been done correctly, this is when you should start to hear some voices. They'll be coming from the mirrors on either side of you, but it's very important that you do not look at these mirrors or make eye contact with whomever is speaking. You just have to keep staring ahead and try to stay calm. One of these voices will be the fool and one will be the queen. You in this scenario are the king. Being the king, you are allowed to ask questions that you would like to be answered. One of these beings will answer the questions. The problem is that you're never going to know who is who. The queen will tell you the truth, whereas the fool will lie to you. Not knowing who is who and having no way to find out makes it very difficult to discern the truth to these questions. Sometimes they may even respond to your question with one of their own, in which case you're obligated to reply. You will be able to speak to these beings for 1 hour, and right as that hour is up, your friend on the outside needs to get your attention. They should knock first, then try to call you. If you haven't responded to either of those, they need to come inside and throw the bucket of water on you. You may not respond to any of these initially because it's said that this ritual can bring you into a very deep trance. A trance that makes that hour you're sitting there feel like an eternity. An entire lifetime where you're stuck in your own mind sitting in that chair. Considering you don't even know if these answers are true or not, the risk is just not worth the reward for this ritual. Number 1 on this list is the corner game. This may be classified as a game, however it is basically a summoning ritual to bring a demon or ghostly spirit to our world. You can't perform this one on your own. You're going to need to have 4 people in total if you want to do this. You're also going to need access to a house without anything living in it other than you and your 3 friends. Turn off all the lights in your building or your home except for the ones in the room that you've chosen to perform the ritual. This room that you've chosen to do your ritual in, it has to have exactly 4 corners. Can't have any more, can't have any less. Head into your room and speak your name 3 times as you enter. Now before you enter the room, you'll have chosen a speaker. From here on out, after you've said your names, they are the only person that's allowed to say anything. Once you're inside and you've all repeated your names, close the door and turn off the lights. Everyone has to go to a corner of their choosing now and face into it with their backs to the center of the room. The speaker will then count to 3, and after they have done so, everyone has to move to the next corner of the room in a clockwise direction without looking at the center of the room. Do this exactly 4 times so that you end up in the same corner that you started in. Once this is completed, you will feel the presence of a figure in the center of the room. This is the demon or ghostly spirit that you've just summoned. hunt. Now what's kind of ridiculous about this is that you've just summoned this being, but you're not actually allowed to turn around and look at it. You have to remain with your back to the wall and just feel its presence. After you've had enough, you need to do the completion procedure, which is where everyone says their full name backwards 3 times, and then one by one, exit the room hoping that the being doesn't follow you or isn't still there. People trying this game have reported having one of their members disappear and not being able to get them back. People have also said that sometimes the room is now forever haunted by this thing that you just summoned. Either way, I would never do this because you literally can't even see the demon that you just brought here. You go through all of this trouble, risk your life, to just stand with your back to the room, staring at a corner. Not really my idea of a good time. Number 5 on this list is the ritual to the other side. This is a ritual performed to let you experience a little bit of the demon world. Now, unlike some of the other demonic rituals on this list, it's relatively tame, and your life, it's not going to be at stake. However, the mental strain that it can have on you can be extremely costing. You're going to need a sizable mirror, enough that you can put both of your hands flat on it while still seeing your upper body. A completely pitch black room with absolutely no light whatsoever. A singular candle, but one that isn't too large and won't illuminate the whole room. Just something where you can see yourself. Also, an alarm and somewhere to sleep. Now, after you have your items, go take a nap. You want to set your alarm for roughly 2 hours of sleep so that when you wake up, you are decently dazed and not fully aware. Right when you wake up, go to your room with your mirror and make it pitch black. Then light your candle and have it somewhere out of sight, just enough light that you can make out your face in the mirror. You want to place both hands on the mirror roughly shoulder width apart and start to stare at yourself. Focus on yourself. Your focus needs to be impeccable if you want this to work. Now start to alter your breathing. A slow breathe in and a longer exhale. You want your mind and your body to go completely blank and feel as if they're exiting your body. If you're doing all of this properly, then you should start to feel subtle vibrations in your hands that ring throughout your arms. This should be followed by your face starting to distort as if you were hallucinating. Now is when the real images start though. People have reported seeing flashes of loved ones who have died where they're supposed to be standing in the mirror, or have their own bodies start to morph into a demon. Sounds and voices will begin to ring throughout the supposedly silent room, and in extreme cases, your entire room will morph itself into a fiery hell. You've now calmed your mind to a state where it is capable of comprehending the demon realm, and you are in it. Now, it's relatively easy to snap out of this place and no harm will come to you, but that's not the case for some people. This experience can be extremely jarring and haunt people for the rest of their lives. In very rare cases, people who have tried this have descended into a deep depression or even madness. I can only imagine that knowing what is on the other side and what could be potentially waiting for us is a very scary place to be. Sometimes, guys, ignorance truly is bliss. Number 4 on this list is a game called the Devil's Game. In this ritual, you will basically be summoning the devil, and summoning the devil can be extremely dangerous. To perform the Devil's Game, you will need a few items. A can of salt, 7 candles, red or white is preferred. A lighter or match to light those candles. Some red string, it could be rope or yarn if that's what you have, but the color has to be red. You'll also need a full-length mirror. Mirrors are pretty common in these rituals, by the way. And lastly, this must be done in a church, and it must be done at midnight when you do it. Also, you are not allowed to have anything electronic or any religious paraphernalia that may help you, like holy water. Now take your salt and surround the mirror on the ground. Then wrap your mirror with the red string. Take your candles and light them and space them out around the mirror as well. All of these things are actually to help protect you from the devil. The summoning you still have to do. To summon the devil, you actually have to do something sacrilegious in the church. This could be anything, but I think the easiest would be some sort of vandalism. Do that and then close all the doors to the room and kill the lights so that you're only lit by the candles. Close your eyes now and count to 10 with the distinct image of the devil in your mind. After you reach 10, open them. You should be staring directly at the devil in the mirror in place of yourself. Now, the devil didn't come all of this way just to look at you. He wants to play. And the game is a simple question and answer game. If you get something right, he'll answer your questions truthfully, but it's not that easy. This is the devil, and the questions that he asks will be specifically made to stump you. In fact, the questions that he asks will be ones that you're never 100% sure that you know the answer to, and therefore you can never be 100% sure if he is telling the truth to you or a lie when he answers your questions. So when you ask him, how am I going to die? And he answers with, you're going to get hit by a bus. Is that the truth? Or is that a lie? You're never gonna know, and for the rest of your life, you will most likely be petrified of buses. Occasionally, he will also dare you to do something. Now this is interesting because if you complete the dare, you will know for certain that the next thing you ask him will be true. If you do the dare, you could ask him next week's winning lottery numbers and he'd have to tell you the truth. But the dare he gives you, it's not gonna be pleasant. Self-harm. Hurting those that you love, completely going against any morals that you thought you had, those are all completely on the table. You could stand to gain a lot from this game, however you could also stand to lose a lot or gain absolutely nothing at all, just a bunch of paranoia. Anytime you summon the devil, it's a bad idea, and the devil's game is no different. Number 3 on this list is Veronica's game. Now Veronica's game is a demonic ritual that will summon Veronica, a demon girl, who died playing a very similar game many years ago. To get this demon's attention, you will need a few items. A mirror, again, a clock, a quiet room, a candle. This ritual will also require you to perform it at midnight, just like the other ones. Have the mirror set up in your quiet room so that it's at eye level with you. At exactly midnight, light the candle and stare into the mirror. Veronica. Veronica. You have to repeat her name 9 times, staring at yourself in the mirror. After you have done so, extinguish the candle and leave the room. Now, why is this called a game? I don't really understand, because there's really nothing fun about it at all. She's with you now. The demon Veronica is now there with you, and whenever you are by yourself, you will feel her presence. You have just awoken a demon who doesn't want to be awake right now, and she's going to haunt you. You'll feel the temperature start to drop whenever you're by yourself. You may hear sounds that you can't identify or sense movement that you don't understand. It's said that if you ever make fun of Veronica in any way, then that's going to be the last thing that you do. This demon supposedly carries around a pair of scissors at all times and will use them on you if she ever feels that you're taunting her. This demonic ritual should absolutely never be performed because you stand absolutely nothing to gain and potentially your life to lose. Number 2 on this list is a ritual performed by a bunch of high school students in 1986. Now this ritual has less to do about the otherworldly things that you may summon and more to do with the fact that this is just wrong and you shouldn't ever do this. 12 high school students were linked to a demonic ritual with the goal of praising Satan and cleansing the world of what Satan or these students may qualify as unworthy. These students had found an abandoned house that they painted black and used that as their main base of operations. They painted it black as apparently a way of keeping the badness in and the goodness out. It was here that they had been performing several demonic rituals for months. One of their rituals, though, culminated on the witch's Sabbath. They had been preparing for this day for quite a while, drawing blood circles in their abandoned home, and speaking various incantations to please their devilish lord. The final act, though, involved a sacrifice. On the witch's Sabbath, one of the 12 high school students, a 15-year-old, snuck into an older student's bedroom with a shotgun and used him for the sacrifice. Yeah, this entry gets kinda real. This was their demonic sacrifice meant to appease the devil. Now I can't say for certain whether the actual ritual worked because there's currently no known knowledge on that. But what I do know is that the 15-year-old and those involved went to jail for a very long period of time. I also know that a 17-year-old boy who had absolutely nothing to do with anything died. Like I said, this one on the list is less about what you may summon and the consequences with that, but more about the fact that you should just never do this. And the fact that people thought this was a good idea, it's just complete insanity. Number 1 on this list is a ritual performed by 2 high school students, Mike and Sid. Now although Mike and Sid kind of sounds like a great name for a sitcom or like a really good cop show, these guys get a little bit darker than that. Longtime high school friends and big fans of the horror movie genre in general, one evening they stumble upon a ritual on a deep part of the internet. The goal is to summon a demon. Even though the boys have a deep respect for demons and don't want to mess around, it's promised online that this demon will be thankful for being summoned and won't cause you any harm. What you need for this ritual is a frog. and a specific incantation in a language called Enochian. I couldn't find the specific incantation that the boys used, and frankly, I mean, it's probably a good thing that this information is difficult to locate. Grab your frog by its hind legs. This is gonna be difficult because it has to still be alive when you are doing this. Stick it directly into sunlight and begin to speak your Enochian incantation. Now, I kinda hate this next part because I love animals, but as you're speaking your hex, kill the frog. Let the blood of the frog drop to the ground. If your spell is working, then you will notice pretty rapidly that the frog itself will start to wither up and shrink. Now, it's said that this should summon a demon in front of you. However, when the boys did this, that's not what happened. Sid was watching as Mike uttered the final words to their ritual. After it was done, Mike stood there for a moment, silently, with the dead, withered up frog in his hands, until he twisted his head 180 degrees backwards and stared directly at Sid with his eyes rolled completely back in his head. Then, without warning, he lunged after Sid in a fully unnatural, inhuman way, spitting and cursing as he did. Sid dodged him and ran out of the house as fast as he could, not stopping for 10 whole minutes. After an hour of waiting and regaining his courage, he carefully made his way back to go check on his friend. Mike was lying completely naked with scratches all over his body, unconscious in the middle of the basement. When he woke up, he had absolutely no memory of the entire incident at all, and doesn't know how he got there.
Number 5, Zach Bagans. Famous ghost hunters have left quite the mark on our understanding of the paranormal, and one such figure is Zach. Known for his work on the popular TV series Ghost Adventures, he has become a prominent investigator in the world of the supernatural. Zach is the host, lead investigator, and an executive producer of Ghost Adventures, and with his paranormal investigation team, travels to domestic and international locations rumored to be haunted in search of evidence proving the existence of the supernatural. After graduating from film school in Michigan, Zach moved to Nevada to pursue a career in documentary filmmaking. There he met fellow Ghost Adventures investigator Aaron Goodwin. And in 2004, Zach founded the world's largest paranormal organization, the Ghost Adventures Crew, which consists of thousands of members. His approach to exploring the unknown has both captivated and polarized audiences. Zach and his team tend to travel to reportedly haunted locations, armed with an array of gadgets like EMF meters, spirit boxes, and night vision cameras. His mythology combines scientific instruments with the, experimental, encouraging entities to communicate through these devices. While skeptics often question the validity of such tools, Zach approaches each investigation with unwavering belief in the existence of the paranormal. In his many years as a ghost hunter, Zach has confronted a variety of supernatural phenomena, from apparitions and electronic voice phenomena, or more commonly known as EVP, to shadow figures and poltergeist activity. His encounters often involve him and his team experiencing unsettling events firsthand. These experiences can be intense, and some argue that they occasionally verge on sensationalism, blurring the line between investigation and entertainment. Zach isn't without his controversies, though. Critics have accused him of exploiting the suffering of entities and trivializing the field of paranormal research. The question of whether his shows are truly investigative or merely sensational entertainment remains, a subject of debate, myself included. Regardless of the controversy though, Zach has undoubtedly made the paranormal world much more accessible to the general public. His passionate pursuit of the supernatural and willingness to dive headfirst into the unknown have drawn millions of viewers into the mysterious realm of ghosts and hauntings. He's played a pivotal role in popularizing paranormal investigation and fostering a growing community of enthusiasts eager to explore the unexplained. So while Zach might not be universally embraced by the skeptics or purists within the field of paranormal research, he undeniably stands as one of the most recognizable and influential ghost hunters in recent history. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or, like me, somewhere in between, his impact on the exploration of the supernatural world can't be denied. Number 4, Grant Wilson. Known for his role on the TV series Ghost Hunters, Grant has definitely left a mark on the realm of paranormal investigation. His path to becoming a renowned ghost hunter was one filled with curiosity, skepticism, and a passion for unraveling the mysteries of the unseen. So Grant, along with his partner Jason Hawes, co-founded the Atlantic Paranormal Society, or TAPS for short, back in 1990. Their mission was clear: to investigate and document reports of paranormal activity using a scientific and logical approach. Unlike many other ghost hunters who relied heavily on mysticism, these two brought a refreshing dose of skepticism and methodical investigation to the field. Their TV show Ghost Hunters, which premiered back in '04, became a sensation. It allowed viewers to witness their real-time investigations of supposedly haunted locations, adding a sense of authenticity to the paranormal game. Wilson's calm and, methodical demeanor balanced out the tension and suspense of the investigations, earning him a reputation as a rational and level-headed investigator. One of Grant's key contributions was the use of common-sense explanations and debunking techniques. He approached each case with a debunk-first mentality, aiming to rule out any logical or scientific explanations before considering the paranormal. This approach resonated with both skeptics and believers, as it offered a more balanced perspective on the unexplained. Now, over the years, Grant and his team encountered a wide range of phenomena, from mysterious voices and unexplained shadows to full-bodied apparitions. Their investigations took them to various iconic locations, in many cases presented puzzling evidence that kept the audiences intrigued. The success of Ghost Hunters made paranormal investigation, along with other shows, accessible to a broader audience. Despite the popularity though, Grant has made a surprising decision. Back in 2012, he announced his departure from the show, leaving fans and colleagues perplexed. He cited, personal reasons and a desire to explore new avenues in his life. This move was met with mixed reactions, as he had become a beloved figure in the world of paranormal TV. While his departure left a void on Ghost Hunters, Grant's legacy as a pioneer in the field of paranormal investigation remains intact. His commitment to applying scientific rigor to the unexplained and his dedication to sharing the process with the public reshaped how we kind of approach ghost hunting. His departure from the show served as a reminder that, even in the realm of the supernatural, change and evolution are constants. In the world of famous ghost hunters, Grant Wilson's impact is undeniable. His measured and methodical approach, combined with his willingness to question the paranormal, has left an enduring legacy. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, Grant's journey is a testament to the power of curiosity, skepticism, and the pursuit of understanding the mysteries that lie beyond our ordinary perception. And so, in the realm of ghost hunters, Grant Wilson stands as a figure who encouraged us to question the unknown, always searching for rational explanations before embracing the paranormal. His journey, like the investigations he conducted, reminds us that even in the shadows, there's always light to be found. Number 3, Amy Bruni. Venturing into the intriguing realm of, famous ghost hunters, we encounter the remarkable journey of Amy. So with a background in hospitality management, she might not be the most conventional choice for a paranormal investigator, but her experiences have made her a prominent figure in the field. Amy is perhaps best known for her role on Ghost Hunters, where she worked as an investigator and co-host. I don't think I need to explain the origins of the show again, do I? So Amy's calm demeanor and analytical approach brought a refreshing perspective to the often, sensationalized world of paranormal TV. What sets Amy apart though is her empathetic approach to ghost hunting. She's not just there to collect data or debunk phenomena, she aims to understand the spirit stories and histories. Her background in hospitality has taught her the importance of human connection, and she often seeks to establish a rapport with the entities she encounters. Throughout her career, Amy has explored numerous iconic and supposedly haunted locations, from historic homes to abandoned asylums. The investigations have yielded a wide range of experiences, from unexplained noises and ghostly apparitions to compelling EVP recordings. And while some skeptics remain unconvinced, there's no denying that Amy's work has resonated with those open to the idea of paranormal encounters. In addition to her work on Ghost Hunters, Amy has continued to investigate the unknown through other projects and her own organization, Strange Escapes. Her goal is not only to explore the mysteries of the paranormal, but also to share her experiences with the public through events and tours. Amy's journey through the world of ghost hunting serves as a reminder that this field isn't limited to traditional investigators. Once again, her background in hospitality, her empathetic approach, and her commitment to understanding the stories behind the hauntings have contributed to her success. While skeptics and believers continue to debate the validity of paranormal encounters, Amy's work has made the mysterious and unexplained much more relatable to a wider audience. So once again, in the fascinating tapestry of famous ghost hunters in our list today, Amy stands as a figure who brings both her unique perspective and genuine curiosity to the exploration of the paranormal. Her journey serves as a testament to the idea that anybody, regardless of your background, you can find yourselves drawn into the world of the unexplained. In the end, it's the human connection, the stories, and the mysteries that drive us to seek answers in the shadows. Number 2, Ryan and Shane. Right away, my brain reminded me of their iconic "We're here for the cult stuff" catchphrase, because my best friend has been obsessed with this duo since their BuzzFeed days. What's that other one? "Hey there, demons, it's me, ya boy." That's one I tend to quote at my scare acting job a lot. So when it comes to famous ghost hunters, a newer generation has emerged. At the forefront are Ryan Bergara and Shane Madej. I apologize if I got the last names wrong, I'm just like Ryan and Shane. These two breathed fresh life into the world of paranormal investigations through their show BuzzFeed Unsolved, which was a blend of humor, skepticism, and genuine curiosity that captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. What set Ryan and Shane apart though from everything else was their unique dynamic. So we've got Ryan, the believer. He's seeking to explore the supernatural, while Shane, the skeptic, brings a healthy dose of rationality to their investigations. Their witty banter and opposing viewpoints add an entertaining twist to the, typical ghost hunting formula. It's not just about seeking answers, it's about engaging viewers in the quest for the unknown. BuzzFeed Unsolved used to cover a wide range of paranormal phenomena, from haunted locations and unsolved mysteries to cryptids and extraterrestrial encounters. The show's approach wasn't about proving or debunking, it was about exploring the stories, the legends, and the unexplained events that have fascinated people for generations. Their investigation took them to quite a few iconic places, including the notoriously haunted Queen Mary and the Winchester Mystery House, which I've talked about a lot. Feel free to watch some other videos, they're great. They've encountered, strange occurrences from unexplained noises, chilling EVPs, mysterious shadows, and eerie visual anomalies. The show is as much about the storytelling as it is about the paranormal investigation. One of the show's key strengths was its accessibility. It spoke to a generation that grew up with the internet and social media. Ryan and Shane interact with their audience, involving them in the mysteries they explore. They acknowledge the skepticism and the wonder, creating a sense of community around the unknown. The show's success also used to lie in its willingness to admit when the answers remain elusive. It didn't always neatly wrap up each investigation with a clear conclusion, but it would leave room for the unknown, encouraging viewers to form their own opinions. Hey, in a field where certainty is often elusive, I like, an honest approach. Ryan and Shane have successfully tapped into the zeitgeist of their time, where the line between skepticism and belief is blurred, and where the allure of the unexplained still captivates us. They bring a sense of humor and humanity to ghost hunting, making it more relatable for a broader audience. Hey, whether you're a true believer or a die-hard skeptic, their exploration of the paranormal provides something for everybody. Trust me. In the world of famous ghost hunters, these two have redefined the genre. They've shown that the fascination with the supernatural is as strong as ever, and that it can be explored with a sense of wonder and humor. So nowadays, like many popular personalities, they left BuzzFeed far behind, but now continue their adventures in their own show, titled Ghost Files. 10 out of 10, recommend. Number 1, Andrew Green. So in the history files of famous ghost hunters, the name Andrew Green stands as a lesser known but significant figure. Born all the way back in 1927 in the United Kingdom, Green had a profound impact on the world of paranormal investigation. His story is one of curiosity, dedication, and a relentless pursuit of the supernatural. Green's journey into the realm of ghost hunting began in his teenage years, when he had a series of inexplicable experiences, including a vivid encounter with the apparition of his mother shortly after her passing. These encounters ignited his interest in the unexplained, and he decided to delve into the world of the paranormal. What makes Andrew's story particularly intriguing is that he didn't confine his investigations to the, well-trodden path of haunted houses and spooky locales. He focused on researching and documenting spontaneous and repeatable apparitional experiences, which he referred to as crises apparitions. Green believed that these apparitions often occurred during times of intense emotion or crises, such as when someone experienced a life-threatening situation or was on the brink of death. He spent years collecting and cataloging cases of crises apparitions, aiming to find patterns and commonalities in these extraordinary events. He meticulously documented over 400 cases of apparitions, using his background in research and statistics to analyze the data. His work led him to propose the idea that these apparitions were not mere hallucinations, but represented a form of communication from the other side. Green's dedication to this research culminated in the publication of his book, Our Unseen Guest, back in 1966, which presented his findings and theories on apparitions. The book received both praise and criticism, but it undeniably sparked a new level of interest in the study of these paranormal phenomena. And what's also remarkable about Andrew is he didn't limit his investigations to the supernatural. He was a trained solicitor, which equipped him with the skills to approach these cases with a critical and analytical mindset. His background in law lent an air of credibility to his research and made his work more accessible to skeptics. Despite facing skepticism and sometimes outright rejection from the scientific community, Andrew's work laid the foundation for further research into crises apparitions and other paranormal phenomena. His story is a reminder that, the pursuit of the unknown often requires a steadfast dedication to curiosity, a willingness to explore the unexplained, and the courage to venture into uncharted territory. So, in the vast tapestry of famous ghost hunters, he might not be a household name, but his legacy lives on.
The man in this photo is named Raymond Robinson, but was better known to locals as No-Face Charlie or the Green Man due to the discoloration of his skin. For the residents of Pennsylvania, he was a real-life ghost. When Raymond was very young, he was injured in an accident involving a power line nearly fatally, and in this accident it took his eyes, his nose, and his arm. Because of the nature of his injuries, Raymond grew up in isolation for fear that his macabre appearance would scare people off. So he kept to himself as much as he possibly could. He rarely left the house, except for night walks along the highway with a stick to help him feel around. Now, rumors of a man with no face who only walks around at highways at night pretty quickly spiraled into urban legend territory because, to its credit, it does sound pretty made up, and Raymond caught the name around town of No-Face Charlie. Locals would try to track him down to get photos photos to gawk at the monster. Sometimes people would call the police when they saw him, thinking that they'd seen a monster that needed to be stopped. But it wasn't all bad. Local high schoolers really responded to the stories of No-Face Charlie, and would oftentimes drive out at night to keep Raymond company, to share drinks and other goodies with him to improve a lonely life. No matter how unsettling someone might look, there is always a person underneath it all, and a story behind it too. And if you like scary stories, my viewers, well, then you are in the absolute perfect place on YouTube right now, because we have got loads of them. Click through for lots more, or stay subscribed for more in the future. Let's keep going. Number 4, Maori trophy heads. I hate to have to be the one to tell you this, but what you're looking at is not a collector posing in front of a bunch of masks. He's a collector, yeah, but the man is showing off his collection of trophy heads. The man in question is Major General Horatio Gordon Robley. Whew, that is a mouthful and a half. He was serving in the British military at the time that this photo was taken, and he was fascinated by the Maori people of New Zealand where he was stationed. Specifically their tradition of face tattoos called moko. Moko was usually done to indicate who were high members of society or who had some renown. When a man with moko passed, it was a cultural practice to preserve the work by mummifying a severed head, removing the eyes and brain, sealing the whole thing together with flax fiber, gum, and shark oil. Horatio was absolutely fascinated by this when he arrived in New Zealand in the 1860s. Proving what a very normal, well-adjusted guy he was, he quickly started collecting the tattooed severed heads, called mokamokai. He would trade firearms and other goods to Maori locals in exchange for his heads, eventually boasting an impressive collection of 35 heads. Apparently he was quite proud of them, posing for photos with them proudly like the image we just showed. It's really interesting to me how this guy found a way where collecting heads was socially acceptable, I guess. Eventually, I guess Horatio got bored of being the head guy, or someone rightfully explained to him that actually it's not normal to have a collection of 35 severed heads, because he tried to sell them back to the New Zealand government, which is one of the most British things I've ever heard. In the end, they wouldn't end up in New Zealand, but now the morbid cabinet of curios found its way to the American Museum of National History, where it was sold for a modest £1,000. Number 3, human dolls. I've always found big dolls pretty creepy. Anything bigger than a Barbie, really. These dolls in these photo in particular really set something off in my brain. And if you're wondering just why there's something about this that's creeping you out so much that you can't quite put your finger on, I'll let you know. It's not just the outdated decor, it's probably because these dolls were made by Anatoly Moskvin, a Russian former journalist who had a hobby of making dolls out of human bodies that he dug up. Anatoly was apparently fascinated by death, stemming, he says, from a truly bizarre incident where as a young boy he was walking home and he was apprehended by men in black suits who ushered him to a funeral and then made him kiss the forehead of the body being buried. The girl's grieving mother put a wedding ring on her daughter's body and then gave another ring to Anatoly. This marriage, I guess, propelled him into a lifelong obsession with death and cemeteries, with Anatoly claiming that he probably knew more about cemeteries than anyone else in his hometown of Nizhny Novgorod, which was probably unfortunately true. In late 2009, graves all around Nizhny Novgorod were being dug up, with loved ones complaining that when they went to mourn, the graves that they had come to pay respects to had been defiled. Anatoly was quickly caught, and police searched his home, where they discovered his horrifying collection of life-size dolls. The house was laid out like something out of a horror movie. Debris and garbage piled everywhere, and 26 life-size dolls strewn all over the apartment. Police reported that some of them had music boxes embedded in them and would play music when they're being moved. Moskvin said he made the dolls because he was lonely and wished that he could have children of his own, as he was not allowed to adopt because he didn't make enough money. And I'm gonna be honest, that probably was for the best. His parents who lived with him claimed that they had no knowledge of the true nature of his hobby, dismissing their son's odd habit as just a strange pastime. Number 2, two-headed dogs. A dog is man's best friend, it's been said. And they say 2 heads are better than 1, so with these 2 concepts in mind, the only thing better as a best friend for a man would be a 2-headed dog. Luckily for us, Russian scientist Vladimir Demikov agreed with this thought process and tried to make his own 2-headed dog. I'll be honest, if you get squeamish about stuff involving dogs or pets, I'd skip over this part of the video. The timestamp will be down there since it's pretty creepy stuff. Anyway, jumping in. It's hard not to call Vladimir Demikov a mad scientist, especially when you see the photos from his workshop. It looks like behind the scenes footage from a horror movie, and your brain wants to believe so badly that what you're looking at is CGI or maybe a puppet. But no, that's a real two-headed dog, horrible as it was, that he created. Demikov was fascinated by organ transplants and tried to further what medicine could do, with dogs as his preferred test subjects. His magnum opus and goal was to successfully transplant a head onto another human being, with the eventual goal being a full-scale head transplant. Now, for all his controversial methods, he actually did further modern medicine a great deal, and his work was essential to what we know now about modern organ transplants. He's credited with creating the world's first artificial heart, as well as the first lung and heart transplants ever performed. But head transplants were the ultimate goal. Any old fool can put lungs in somebody else, and he believed firmly if he could get it to work on a dog, he could make it work on a man. He performed this experiment 23 times with no success. I would have thrown in the towel by the 23rd dog hybrid, but it was his 24th time where he would find some success at an international audience as well as infamy. A smaller dog was grafted to a German Shepherd by the head and neck, and the operation took 3 hours, and miraculously the dog survived, and this poor creature could see, hear, smell, eat, and swallow. In the end, and probably for the best, this thing only survived for 4 days after this. Demikov continued his experiments, eventually creating a two-headed dog that lived for 29 days, his lasting record. Unsurprisingly, his work was met with great concern over the ethics and the nature of his experiments, which is, very understandable since, you're kind of doing what Frankenstein does, just sewing dogs together. That's usually something people take umbrage with. Some scientists believe today that a head transplant is closer to reality than we might think. Number 1. Dyaltov Pass Incident. At first, this picture might not be as horrifying as some of the other ones I've shown you. We got a pretty creepy bunch here. This one's got a creepy atmosphere to it for sure, but it's in more of a liminal way than pictures of a guy with no eyes or two-headed dogs. But what makes this picture so downright unsettling is that this is the last photo ever taken of the 9 hikers who vanished in the Dyaltov Pass incident, one of the strangest unsolved mysteries on record. This photo was taken February 1st, 1959, the day that the group was thought to have died. For some backstory, in 1959, a group of experienced hikers set out to climb Otorten, a mountain in the north of Soviet Russia. The leader of the expedition, Alexeyevich Dyaltov, promised that he would send a telegram from the peak to his sports club. The telegram never arrived, and the men were never heard from again. Weeks passed without any word from the hikers, and authorities set out to try and find them, succeeding after weeks of searching. But what they found did not conclude anything and only made matters stranger. The group's bodies had been ravaged and displaced. Some of the people had eyes and tongues missing, while others had been destroyed in a way that seemed like they'd been struck by a car. The bodies were scattered all across the mountain, leading to much more confusion. They had found a tent from the group that had been cut open from the inside, and scattered around the campsite were boots, coats, and gear that had seemingly been left behind in a hurry after some members of the group had fled somewhere. From what is anyone's guess. 2 of the bodies that had been discovered weren't wearing clothes at all, despite the obviously freezing conditions around them. Every single new piece of evidence that authorities found only seemed to further the mystery. Some of the bodies were disfigured, some of the bodies were found wearing clothes that clearly belonged to other bodies that had been scavenged or looted. There were small amounts of radiation detected on the clothes of the found hikers. Everything was like pieces of a puzzle that just didn't fit together. The Dyaltov Pass incident is rife for conspiracists, and there are many great videos out there on the subject and lots of cool stuff to read. It's fascinating. The theories range from anything from supernatural involvement or hysteria and madness or government secret projects. Were they attacked out in the woods by something or someone? There were some who believed it could have been an attack from a local tribe called the Mansi who lived in the surrounding mountains. But the tribe was peaceful, so it was unlikely. As well, the damage that had been done to the bodies was so severe, it was described as being closer to car crash injuries than it was human inflicted. An avalanche seemed like the most prevailing theory. It would make sense why it would scare the hikers awake in the night, ripping open the tent and causing them to flee unprepared, but avalanches weren't particularly common in that area, and furthermore, the hikers present were all fairly experienced, and unlikely to make a mistake like camping somewhere near the danger of an avalanche. More extreme theories posit that the group was exposed to some sort of new weapon that was being tested, as a possible explanation for the radiation and bizarre injuries. In the end, officially, the hikers' deaths were ruled as natural force. But anyone involved knew that there was more to the story. The case was actually reopened in 2019, fairly recently, reaffirming the belief that what happened was an avalanche that split the group up and led them to trying to survive in the mountains for a few days valiantly. That's the news story, and whether or not that's the truth, we may never know.
Number 5 on this list is the cemetery baby demon. This photo clearly shows the apparition of a young child with jet black eyes floating over top of a gravestone. Stephen Wagner writes, "A woman named Mrs. Andrews was visiting the grave of her daughter in a cemetery in Queensland, Australia in 1946. Her daughter Joyce had died about a year earlier in 1945 at the age of 17. Mrs. Andrews saw nothing unusual when she took this photo of Joyce's grave marker. When the film was developed, Mrs. Andrews was astonished to see the image of a small child sitting happily at her daughter's grave. The ghost child seems to be aware of Mrs. Andrews since he or she is looking directly into the camera. Is it possibly a double exposure? Mrs. Andrews said there was no such children nearby when she took the photograph, and moreover didn't recognize the child at all. It was no one she would have taken a picture of. She remarked that she didn't believe it was the ghost of her daughter as a child." Investigating this case, Australian paranormal researcher Tony Healy visited the cemetery in the late 1990s. Near Joyce's grave, he found the graves of 2 infant girls. So Wagner brings up the possibility of double exposure there, and that's a really common explanation for what could cause such an image. A double exposure is a combination of 2 images into one where one image is overlaid onto another at less than full opacity. This is done with artistic intent unless you're shooting film and forgot to wind it in between shots, but still you might get a happy accident. So it's possible that double exposure could be at play here if she forgot to wind the film, but then she would have had to take a picture of a young girl who looked like this in the first place. She claimed that she never did that, and also even if she did, that still wouldn't explain the eyes. Jet black eyes and looking about as close as possessed as they can be, this child certainly has some demon characteristics. Number 4 on this list is the railroad demon. Wagner once again writes, "A strange legend surrounds a railroad crossing just south of San Antonio, Texas. The intersection of roadway and railroad tracks, so the story goes, was the site of a tragic accident in which several school-aged children were killed, but their ghosts linger at the spot and will push idled cars across the tracks even though the path is uphill. The story may be just the stuff of urban legend, but the accounts were intriguing enough that an article about the phenomenon, the haunted railroad crossing, was written. The article included a photograph submitted by Andy and Debbie Chesney. Their daughter and some of her friends had recently been to the crossing to test the legend, and she took some photographs. Inexplicably, a strange, transparent figure turned up in one of the photos. They had no idea that it was in the picture until the next day when I printed out the photo and showed them," said the Chesneys. "It was really freaky. It appears to be a little girl carrying a teddy bear. Other readers who have viewed the photo think it shows a little girl with a dog sitting at her feet." Now, I don't like to classify demons as ghosts and ghosts as demons because they're certainly different. But even if what's going on here is due to a ghostly presence, then said ghostly presence certainly has demonic qualities. To be able to physically push a car and then also do it with the intention of killing those inside or killing those on the train, that's extremely evil, guys. I looked into the legend into San Antonio to see what had actually happened there, and it was really tragic. Back in the 1930s, a school bus full of children stalled on the tracks right before a train was scheduled to come. They raced to get off the bus, but not all of them made it, and 10 children lost their lives that day in the horrible accident. The more I looked into it though, the more I found that most people's experiences with these children have actually been good and not demon-like. That if you park your car on the tracks and leave it in neutral, they'll actually push it off the tracks to safety. All of this could be just one big hoax, but a picture like that goes a long way in validating the legend. Number 3 on this list is the backseat demon. Ever get the feeling when you're in a car that you aren't alone or somebody's watching you? Well, if you do, then you may have cause to be a little scared based on this photo. In 1959, a woman named Mabel Chinnery and her husband were visiting the grave of Mabel's mother. Whilst they were there, Mabel pulled out her camera and snapped a photo of her husband in the front seat of their car by himself. Except, when the film was developed, it's clear that he wasn't by himself. In the backseat of the car, you can see that there's some sort of humanoid creature right behind him. It's very dark and hard to make out, but apparently Mabel knew exactly what it was. To her, the being in the back looks identical to her mother, the person whose grave they were visiting that day. This picture was taken to an expert and they concluded that it was not not double exposure and the picture hadn't been tampered with. This has led most people to believe that the only real explanation for this photo is something supernatural. Number 2 on this list is the Wem Town Hall Demon. Back in 1995 in Shropshire, England, Wem Town Hall, an old building built in 1905, burned to the ground. Locals gathered and watched as the fire department tried to save the building, but alas, it was no use and it did eventually burn down. During the blaze, some of these bystanders took some photos of what was going on, and one of them, when it was later developed, started quite the controversy. As you can see in this picture, there's very clearly a girl standing behind some bars in the building. Now, before we go any further, I want to say that this isn't a living person in danger, because from my research, nobody actually got hurt in this fire. The thing is, though, that if this wasn't a living person, then who the heck is it? Well, the legend says that this apparition is that of a girl named Jane Churm. Jane Churm was a young girl who lived back in the 1600s but died in a tragic fire. This fire took place in the town of Wem, and it was actually said to be started by Jane herself. Now, back then in the 1600s, the fire was started by accident, but that might not have been the case for the one in 1995. Lots of people think that Jane actually started this fire and that the picture shows her ghost or a demonic version of her watching her work. It should also be noted that Dr. Vernon Harrison, an expert in photography, studied this photo and concluded that it was a genuine photograph. Pretty spooky stuff if you ask me. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Tulip Staircase Demon. This one is scary for a number of different reasons. Stephen Wagner says, Reverend Rolf Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, took this now famous photograph in 1966. He intended merely to photograph the elegant spiral staircase known as the Tulip Staircase in the Queen's House section of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. Upon development, however, the photo revealed a shrouded figure climbing the stairs, seeming to hold the railing with both hands. Experts, including some from Kodak, who examined the original negative, concluded that it had not been tampered with. It's been said that unexplained figures have been seen on occasion in the vicinity of the staircase, and unexplained footsteps have also been heard. This photo isn't the only evidence of ghostly activity at the Queen's House either. The 400-year-old building is credited with several other apparitions and phantom footsteps even today. A few years ago, a gallery assistant was discussing a tea break with 2 colleagues when he saw one of the doors to the bridge room close by itself. At first, he thought it was one of the lecturers. Other ghostly incidents include the unexplained choral chanting of children, the figure of a pale woman frantically mopping blood at the bottom of the Tulip Staircase, slamming doors, and even tourists being pinched by unseen fingers. So very clearly, this place is deeply haunted, guys. I think arguments can be made that there are ghosts, demons, maybe even creatures all chilling at this one spot. Whenever we capture a photograph like this, and it's literally of a place that already has a legend surrounding it, I think that really adds to its legitimacy. People had been saying for years that something was up here, and then there was finally some proof when this picture was taken. Also, the fact that it's been proven to be genuine makes it pretty hard to explain. Number 5 on this list is Lord Combermere, or maybe better put as the ghost of Lord Combermere. The picture that we're going to look at today depicts the ghostly silhouette of the late Lord Combermere sitting in his chair. Insider writes, amateur photographer Corbet allegedly set up her camera and took this hour-long exposure while the funeral of her brother-in-law, Lord Combermere, was taking place 4 miles from the home. Interestingly, the apparition that appears to be sitting in the deceased Lord Combermere's chair is suggested to be Lord Combermere himself. I think the scariest part about this photograph is the timing. The fact that this was apparently captured literally right when the funeral for this man was being held. It's very possible that his spirit could have still been in and around the area and wasn't quite ready to leave the world of the living yet. Ghost Story UK says, it's thought by some that during that time a servant might have come into the room and sat briefly in the chair, creating the transparent image. This idea was refuted by members of the household, all testifying that they were all attending Lord Combermere's funeral. Sir William Barrett, who investigated the case and reported on it, and the Journal of the Society for Physical Research was not satisfied. Working on the theory that a manservant may have come in and seated himself in the chair, he took a test photograph and got a picture that was almost a duplicate of the Combermere photograph. The matter seemed ended, but as he told in his book On the Threshold of the Unseen in 1918, sometime later he received a letter from Lord Combermere's daughter-in-law about the photograph. She said that the face was always too indistinct to be quite convincing to me, though some of his children had no doubt at all of the identity. I may add, none of the manservants in the house closely resembled the figure and were all young men who were all attending the funeral. No one resembled him and everyone was out of the house when this photo was taken. For years the church and others have tried to explain this photograph, but they just simply can't. Maybe it was the ghost of Lord Combermere, or maybe it was a demon playing a trick on all of us. We may never know. Number 4 on this list is Freddie Jackson. In this photo, we're going to be looking at Sir Victor Goddard's Royal Air Force Squadron. This picture was taken in 1919 after World War I and showed a bunch of young strapping pilots. What's wild about this though is the unexpected visitor that we have in the back row. If we zoom into the top row and look at the man fourth from the left, we can see something over his right shoulder. An apparition of sorts that resembles a human face. After people started taking note of this and examined it, those who had worked with the squadron identified that face as Freddie Jackson. Freddie Jackson was a mechanic with this squadron for a while, but the crazy part is that he had died in a propeller accident several days earlier. Similarly to Lord Combermere, the day that this picture was taken was the day of his funeral. Maybe his ghost showed up because he was pissed all his friends were taking pictures and not paying their respects. But seriously though, how on earth do you explain a photo like that with tons of other people in it? It's impossible for it to have been staged, and it's clear that there's something there. Hopefully Freddie was able to find peace after his impromptu photo bomb. Number 3 on this list is the couple's demon. William Hope was a paranormal investigator who lived from 1863 to 1933. During that time, he was responsible for capturing a wide array of spiritual photographs which showcase ghosts and demons. Now, after evaluating some of his work, I think it's fair to assume that some of it is doctored. I'm not sure how one man would have been able to capture all the demonic pictures that he did without potentially faking a few. That being said though, I don't think that everything he's done has been doctored, and I imagine that there are some with serious legitimacy to them. One of his most famous is of an older couple with what clearly looks to be a demon standing behind them. When they took this photo, nobody was physically there, and they could only capture this devilish creature when they looked at the film after the fact. Some other entries on this list, I mean, you might be able to classify as a ghost, but this is 100% a demon. The eyes are black and unforgiving, and it looks as if you're getting sucked into a black hole of nothingness. You can't make out this creature's lower body at all, and she's just all black. She reminds me a lot of a few urban legends of female demons appearing around the world. Their stories differ, but there are some commonalities between them all. Usually a woman appears like this to a stranger, asks them a few questions, and if they don't answer properly, will drag them to hell. I'm actually surprised that the people in this photograph managed to get out of it safely without feeling her presence or being attacked while they were there. I'm pretty sure that the church can explain this one, they just probably won't like the explanation very much. Number 2 on this list is the lady in the lift. Whenever you step into an elevator, it feels as if you've stepped into a portal of some kind. If you really think about it, it kind of is a portal, considering you start on one floor and then finish on a different one. Now obviously there isn't anything magical about said elevators, and this portal of sorts is really just a mechanical innovation that takes you up and down tall buildings. That being said, this non-paranormal portal definition might not apply to the elevator in this photo. As we can see, there are a few people hanging out and chatting by the elevators. This was a picture captured by a doctor in a hospital in Bolivia. The elevator in the right of the image decided to open all by itself though. The group didn't think anything of it at the time, but when they looked back, noticed something fairly unsettling. The apparition of a woman is clearly standing in the elevator, staring right at them. No one knows who this woman is, but it's clear that she's either a ghost or a demon. Elevators have always seemed to have a connection to ghostly apparitions for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they do give off the sensation of being a portal, but there are a lot of stories connected to elevators and hauntings. This photo actually reminds me a lot of a haunted place in Austria. A young girl was at a university residence during Christmas. She was pretty much the only one who stayed there and didn't go home for the holidays. While she was there by herself, she accidentally stepped into the elevator shaft and fell to her death. Now she's set to haunt that elevator and torment those who step inside. Maybe this photo is of a similar story, but just at the hospital. It's impossible to say for sure, but either way, guys, I'd be taking the stairs. And finally, number 1 on this list is the little boy. This photo is extremely scary and just flat out disturbing. BuzzFeed writes, the Reddit user who posted this image was deeply skeptical that there was anything paranormal going on, although they couldn't deny there is something chilling about the figure of a little boy staring out from the ruins of an old school. I grew up in a small rural town in between mountains. A couple years ago, they were tearing down an old elementary school. A guy my mom knew went in and took pics with his cell phone. When he uploaded them, this was one of the pics. I don't believe in stuff like this at all. I just really don't know how to explain it since it was a cell phone pic, and I'm pretty sure that no one in my podunk hometown knows how to make fake pics. So maybe he doesn't know how, but I know how to explain it. You're in the ruins of an old school, and those ruins are haunted by the demon of a young boy. Sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones, and this to me looks like an example of that. This little dude 100% looks possessed, and you can't even really make out his legs. Nor can you actually see his arms either, for that matter. Kind of difficult to make up a logical explanation for a kid with no arms and no legs floating in the middle of an abandoned school. Also, side note, but can you imagine being the one to take this picture? Like, you turn a corner and you see that dude and your first thought is, I'm gonna pull out my phone and take a picture of this kid. Like, if that's me, I am straight up running out of that thing and we're burning that building hot.
In 5th place, we have witch cakes to kick us off. Sadly, these aren't yummy Halloween cakes, a thought which makes me very hungry, but instead a bizarre form of counter magic, a supernatural dessert used to identify suspected evildoers. In cases of mysterious illness or possession, witch hunters would take a sample of the victim's urine, mix it with rye meal and ashes, and bake it into a cake. This stomach-turning concoction was then fed to a familiar or animal helper of the suspected witch in the hopes that the creature would fall under its spell and reveal the name of the guilty sorcerer. During the hysteria that preceded the Salem witch trials, Tituba famously helped prepare a witch cake to identify the person responsible for bewitching young Betty Paris and others. The brew failed to work, and Tituba's knowledge of spells and folk remedies was later used as evidence against her when she was accused of being a witch. Before I forget, another use for a witch cake came from burning the pastry in hopes that the scorching heat would transfer to the witch and force her to reveal herself. Whew. Anybody else starting to get warm? Oh great, just me. In 4th place, we have a scold's bridle, also known as a witch's bridle, a gossip's bridle, a brank's bridle, or simply branks. This was an instrument of punishment as a form of public humiliation. This thing was an iron muzzle in an iron framework that enclosed the head. Some exceptions were masks that depicted suffering, but not pleasant either way. My brain just jumped to a similar modern device used for pleasure instead of pain, and no, I will not elaborate on that thought, but let's clarify. A bridle bit, or cur plate, around 5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters in size, was slid into the mouth and pressed down on top of the tongue, often with a spike on the tongue as a compress. It functioned to silence the wearer from speaking entirely, and caused extreme pain and physiological trauma to scare and intimidate the wearer into submission. This prevented speaking and resulted in many unpleasant side effects for the wearer, including excessive salivation and fatigue in the mouth. Seeing as I've always been a chatty Cathy, I can totally see how I would have been sentenced to this, and my jaw hurts just thinking about it. The wearer was then led around the town by a leash, and for extra humiliation, a bell could also be attached to, draw in crowds. First recorded in Scotland in 1567, the branks were also used in England and its colonies. The Kirk sessions in barony courts in Scotland inflicted the contraption mostly on female transgressors, and women considered to be rude, nags, common scolds, drunken, but mostly witches. It was also used as corporal punishment for other offenses, notably on female workhouse inmates. The person to be punished was placed in a public place for additional humiliation and sometimes beaten. Just sometimes, not every time apparently. Knowing what I know about history and cover-ups, I'm going to lean towards probably most of the time. The Lanarkburg records record a typical example of the punishment being used. When wearing the device, it was, impossible for the person to either eat or speak. Other pranks included an adjustable gag with a sharp edge, causing any movement of the mouth to result in laceration of the tongue. In Scotland, pranks could also be permanently displayed in public by attaching them, for example, to the town cross, tron, or toll booth. Then the ritual humiliation would take place, with the miscreant on public display. Displaying the pranks in public was intended to remind the populace of the consequences of any rash action or slander. Whether the person was paraded or simply taken taken to the point of punishment, the process of humiliation and expected repentance was the same. Time spent in the brittle was normally allocated by the Kirk session in Scotland or by a local magistrate. In third place, we have a ducking chair, not to be confused with a cucking chair, which is a whole other concept, or the red hot stools women accused of having sexual acts with the devil would have to sit on. I sadly don't have enough information to unpack that stool, other than ouch! But let's get on with the ducking, shall we? The ducking stool was a strongly made wooden armchair, often made out of oak, in which the offender was seated, with an iron band being placed around them so that they would not fall out during their immersion. How thorough. The earliest record of the use of such is towards the beginning of the 17th century, with the term first being attested in English in 1597. It was used both in Europe and in the English colonies of North America. Usually the chair was fastened to a long wooden beam fixed as like a seesaw on the edge of a pond or river. And as much as I love and miss wooden playgrounds, I feel like this might not have been as fun. Sometimes the ducking stool was not a fixture, but was mounted on a pair of wooden wheels so that it could be wheeled through the streets, and at the river edge was hung by a chain from the end of a beam. In sentencing a woman, the magistrates ordered the number of duckings she should have, and as much as I've scoured the internet, I can't seem to find number data on this. If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments. Another type of ducking stool was called a tumbrel, and was a chair on two wheels with two long shafts fixed to the axles. This was pushed into the pond, and then the shafts would be released, ergo tipping the chair up backwards. Sometimes the punishment proved fatal and the subject died. Once again, the sometimes should be taken with a pound of salt. In medieval times until the early 18th century, ducking was a way used to establish whether a suspect was a witch. The ducking stools were first used for this purpose, but ducking was later inflicted without the chair. In this instance, the subject's right thumb was bound to her left big toe, her left thumb to her right big toe, a rope was tied around the waist of the accused, and she was thrown into a river or a deep pond. If she floated, it was deemed that she was in league with the devil, rejecting the baptismal water. If she sank, she was cleared. Oh, and she'd be dead. Can't forget that part. Silly me. In second place, we have witch mark hunting and pricking. Witch hunters often had their suspects stripped and publicly examined for signs of an unsightly blemish that witches were said to receive upon making their pact with Satan. This devil's mark could supposedly change shape and color and was believed to be numb and insensitive to pain. Prosecutors might also search for the witch's teat, which was an extra nipple allegedly used to suckle the witch's helper animals. In both cases, it was really easy for even the most minor physical imperfections to be labeled as the work of the devil himself. Oh my, the horror. Moles, scars, birthmarks, sores, and tattoos could all qualify, so examiners rarely came up empty-handed. I'm trying to think of just how many birthmarks I have all over my body, so just add that to the tally of how I'm, a witch. Seriously, I feel the burning from the flames already. In the midst of witch hunts, desperate villagers would sometimes even burn or cut off any offending marks on their bodies, only to have their wounds labeled as proof of a covenant with the devil. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If I'm adding like scars to my blemish count, yeah, forget it. Okay, I think the temperature in here just went up another couple of degrees. Seriously. If witch hunters struggle to find obvious evidence of witches' marks on a suspect's body, they might resort to the ghastly practice of pricking as a means of, sussing it out. Come on! Even having a flawless body isn't going to exonerate you? What the heck? Witch hunting books and instructional pamphlets noted that the marks were insensitive to pain and couldn't bleed, so examiners used specially designed needles to repeatedly stab and prick at the accused person's flesh until they discovered a spot that produced the desired results. In England and Scotland, the punishment was eventually performed by well-paid professional prickers, many of whom were actually con men who used adult needle points to identify fake witches' marks. Well then, if you ever feel like your job just, isn't real, remember that people in history were paid to do well. Along with pricking, the unfortunate suspect might also be subjected to scratching by their supposed victims. This test was based on the notion that possessed people found relief by scratching the person responsible with their fingernails until they drew fluid. If their symptoms improved after clawing at the accused's skin, it was seen as partial evidence of guilt. No, absolutely not. I can't see anyone being proven innocent whatsoever from this nonsense. Talk about a biased court. In first place, we have dismemberment and mutilation. This is where my own stomach gets all topsy-turvy, so fair warning, I can handle creepy stuff, no problem. But gore? There's a reason I haven't been able to bring myself to watch the Terrifier movies. So when witch hunters wanted to get answers back in the day, if I haven't made it clear enough by now, they didn't really care about being humane or, coercion, just being right. They would do whatever they deemed necessary to get a confession, leading many witches to confess just to make the pain stop and end their lives, humanely, say goodbye to your fingernails, because that was practically just a footnote in what they were allowed to do. Walpurga Hosmanen of Bavaria was led through multiple different stages of mutilation while being paraded to her execution. At the first stop, her left breast and right arm were branded with irons, then her right breast at the second stop, her left arm at the third, with her left hand being then branded at the fourth stop. Once they reached the place of execution, her right hand, with which she had made her oath as a midwife, was cut off before she was finally burned alive at the stake. Oh, her ashes were not allowed to remain on soil, but they were just, dumped in a stream. Probably the most extreme extent of this was a punishment normally reserved for killers, but exceptions were made for witches who confessed without torture to crimes deemed brutal enough for it. Are y'all ready for this? The offender would be strapped to 4 horses, with one arm or leg attached to each separate horse, and then on command, the horses would start running and rip the offender's arms and legs off. The person would die somehow, and painfully, through life source and limb loss.
The fatal cave of the gods. This is Pluto's gate at Hierapolis in Turkey. Now, if you want to see what the ancient world feared most, stand in front of a cave so lethal that animals dropped to their demise the moment they approached it. Not from curses, not from myths, but from a real, invisible force that seemed to come straight from the underworld. This isn't a legend, this is Pluto's gate. The Plutonian of Hierapolis, an ancient ritual site that Greeks and Romans genuinely believed was a portal to hell. In antiquity, priests would guide bulls, goats, and birds towards the cave's narrow entrance. Now, crowds watched from specially built kind of stone seating, which sounds uncomfortable. The second the animal's hooves or wings crossed the threshold, it would collapse, twitch, and pass away. People screamed, pilgrims fainted, and the priests, well, they walked out unharmed, as if protected by the gods themselves. Now, the truth, revealed only in modern times, made the site even creepier. The cave sits directly on top of a fissure in the planet's crust that emits highly concentrated carbon dioxide. Now, the toxic gas flows like a river along the ground, invisible yet very lethal. The priests weren't immune, they just understood the airflow. They stayed higher up above the lethal air, appearing supernatural. Ancient writers described the site as a place where the living could speak to the deceased. Offerings were thrown into the darkness, rituals honoring the underworld took place at sunrise when the vapors were strongest. Entire religious ceremonies were built around the cave's lethal breath, viewed not as danger, but as the literal exhale of hell itself. Today, the entrance still emits vapors. Small animals occasionally collapse near it. Archaeologists exploring it with modern equipment recorded lethal concentrations. The same ancient force that terrified entire civilizations still linger in that darkness. Masaya volcano in Nicaragua, the fire mouth of the devil. Now imagine a volcanic crater so terrifying that Spanish, conquistadors were convinced the devil lived inside it. A place where ancient tribes performed rituals, sacrifices, and communications with gods who live beneath the earth. A place christened with a name that translates to the mouth of hell. This is Masaya, one of the most feared ritual sites in Central American history. Now, when, they first approached Masaya in the 1500s, they saw fire kind of exploding out of the earth, illuminating the night sky with a deep red glow. The local tribes warned them that this was the doorway to the world below, a sacred and dangerous place inhabited by beings that are not human, not mortal, and definitely not friendly. The Spanish watched volcanic bombs kind of flying from the crater, lightning spiraling inside the smoke, and rivers of molten rock moving like living creatures. They recorded that the indigenous people offered, sacrifices to stop the spirits below from being or bringing destruction. But what the Spanish didn't know was that the Masaya, had been a ritual center long before they arrived. For centuries, the Cortega and other local groups left offerings at the crater's edge. Some reports describe priests entering caves connected to the volcano, believing that they were descending into a spiritual realm. Archaeologists have discovered, obsidian blades, pottery fragments, and burned remains, signs of ritual practices involving fire, smoke, and communication with the underworld. Now, the conquistadors became terrified. They performed exorcisms at the volcanic rim. They even tried to lower a man into the crater with a rope to retrieve what they believed was literal treasure from hell. The rope snapped. The man was consumed by smoke and heat instantly. Now, centuries later, Masaya is still active. It's still glowing. It's still smoking. And locals still call it the same thing their ancestors did. The door to the place no living person should just ever try to enter. So don't. Fengdu Ghost City in China. This is the ancient staircase to the afterlife. There are places built to honor the deceased, and then there are places built to guide souls into the afterlife. Now, this Fengdu Ghost Ghost City belongs to the second category. An entire mountain carved into temples, judgment halls, demon statues, tortured grounds, and stairways designed to show exactly what awaits you after demise. It's a physical map of hell built into stone. Travelers arriving centuries ago described the mountain as unnervingly silent. The temples towered above them, painted demons sculled from the rooftops, bridges curved over dark ravines, statues depicted hungry ghosts and tormented spirits, and monstrous judges who decided whether a soul would reincarnate or be dragged and turn, internal torment. Now, this site dates back nearly 2,000 years. Now, according to legend, two scholars traveled to the mountain to practice Taoism, if I'm saying that right. Over the years, they became so spiritually powerful that people believed they had ascended beyond mortality, becoming rulers of hell. Their names combined formed the phrase King of Hell, and the mountain was transformed into a ritual of, pilgrimage site representing the entire underworld. Worshippers walked pathways meant to replicate the soul's journey after demise. The bridge of helplessness was designed to determine moral purity. Now, the ghost torment pass displayed scenes of punishment. The last glance at home tower represented the final moment a spirit looks back at Earth before passing fully into the afterlife. Earthquakes, wars, and floods have struck the mountain. Baifengu Ghost City remains standing eerily above the Yangtze River like a gateway the living were never meant to cross. The Mayan underworld entrance, this is Acton, Tunchil, Munkal, Belize, if I said that right. Tour guides call it just a cave. Locals call it something far more chilling. The gateway to Ixalba, which is the Mayan underworld. Now, this isn't just a cave system, it's a labyrinth that once hosted rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies dedicated to gods who rule demise, disease, and darkness. We're not talking about the movie from the 80s. We're really talking about from deeper than that. Now, the deeper you go, the stranger and more unsettling it does become. To enter the cave, you actually have to wade through water. It's very cold, very dark, and eerily still. The walls echo with every drop of moisture. Ancient Maya believed that caves were, portals, liminal spaces where the boundary between the living and the deceased dissolved. And Acton, is one of the most important ritual caves ever discovered. Inside, archaeologists found poetry offerings arranged in patterns, fire pits used for ceremonies, and skeletal remains, including the famous Crystal Maiden. Her bones, preserved for centuries, have become coated in shimmering, salicite and giving her an almost supernatural glow. Now, she was likely a sacrificial victim, unfortunately, positioned deep within the cave as an offering to appease the gods. Other remains show signs of trauma, consistent with ritual execution. Now, the Maya believed these sacrifices kept balance between worlds, ensuring rain, crops, fertility, and protection. As you walk deeper, the air becomes heavier. The silence becomes oppressive. Some explorers say they feel watched, not by animals, but by something older. Sections of the cave are still off limits today because of their spiritual importance, and even modern, Maya communities continue to revere the cave as a sacred place connected to the underworld. Lake Avernus in Italy, this is the Roman gateway to the underworld. There's a lake in Italy that the Romans feared so deeply they believed birds couldn't even fly over it without falling straight from the sky. A lake so dark, its vapors so heavy, its water so still, that entire civilizations treated it as the front door to hell. This is Lake Avernus, the ancient legendary entrance to the underworld described by poets, historians, and priests for over 2,000 years. Now, Lake Avernus sits inside an ancient volcanic crater. Thick forests once surrounded it, blocking sunlight and creating a very eerie perpetual twilight. Ancient writers described the air as so toxic, they said the atmosphere alone was enough to unalive anything small that tried to cross it. Now, the Romans built temples, shrines, and ritual sites around the lake, not to celebrate life, but to communicate with the deceased. This site is, referenced in epic tales where heroes descend through caverns near the lake to enter the underworld. The priestesses of the underworld were believed to live nearby, guiding rituals that allowed the living to speak with the spirits. Now, archaeologists later discovered tunnels, chambers, and carved passageways around the lake, hinting that it may have been used for, initiation rites. One underground system, a massive winding passage, and it seems intentionally built to simulate a journey into the land of the deceased, whether used by priests, royalty, or maybe secret societies. No one actually knows for sure. Volcanic gases once rose from the lake's surface, and mist clung to the water. On the darkest days, the entire crater looks like just one big cauldron. No wonder the ancients believed the earth itself opened here. Today the lake looks peaceful, but the stories remain. I mean, some locals still won't go near it after sunset, and I don't blame them.